90.3 FM HD Minneapolis, and on the web at kfai.org. Radio without boundaries for over 42 years now. It's going to be 43 in just a couple of days on May 1st. As we always do at about this time, Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we go live with Conversations with Al McFarlane. It's an extended edition today, so if you're tuning in, waiting to hear from Lady J afterwards, she will be back next week. She has ceded her time to Mr. Al McFarlane, and I will do that here as well. Mr. Al, are you there?
Hey, Mason, how are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you, or to see the KFAI logo. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully folks are seeing that out on all your streams there, and it'll be there up till 4 o'clock. I'm very excited to hear these extended conversations.
Great. Wonderful. We've got a great program, and let me know when we're ready to go. Are we ready to go now? I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here, as always, here on KFAI. And today's program is a special one because we are allowed to take on the regular show of Lady J, giving us time to spend more time with you, more time on important topics of the day. Momentarily, we believe we'll be joined by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. I got a note on the sideband. There's a trouble connecting, and an option for you, Keith Ellison, might be to dial in on your smartphone, but we'll stand by for you. We've got a great program. The program, outside of hearing the presentation by interview with the Attorney General, we're going to talk to leaders in the community about the whole question, the history, the passion, the responsibility of how we engage, employ, protest as a community. Looking back at what we've done in the past, how we organize and prepare ourselves for our righteous duty that takes place in the form of the protest, and how do we protect what we stand for, protect our community, protect the sensibility of a peaceful protest being peaceful. It's a big question. It's on everybody's mind right now. Witness the things that happened after the murder of George Floyd. Witness the tension we all were feeling, waiting for the results to be renounced in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Well, today, as a town hall, we're going to have that discussion with leaders in our community, and I'm joined by Alfred Babington Johnson, who is the visionary leader of the Stair Step Foundation and a principal in His Works United, a community organization of pastor leaders, of elders in the Black church, who are having a discussion around an open letter they have sent to the community, asking us to examine our history, our role, and our future, how we use the protest as a tool for development, and how we protect our interests. I also want to thank that I have my colleagues from the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Kelvin, you can bring them into the screen. Stacy Brown is here. Stacy Brown is the national editor of the Black Press of America. Our organization is called NNPA, National Newspaper Publishers Association. And Stacy, thank you for being here. Number one, our program today is also being carried on Black Press USA. So our audience today is national. And if you are listening on the radio here on KFAI and you want to join this from a visual basis, either the Insight News YouTube page, Insight News on Facebook, or you can go to Black Press USA NNPA and be part of a national audience discussing this issue. Again, we'll be checking in to see as soon as we can get Attorney General Keith Ellison on, but let us begin. Stacy Brown, welcome. And let me also bring on camera my colleague, Reverend Alfred Babington Johnson. Brother Babington, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you for being here. And I want us to engage, first of all, as we wait for Attorney General Ellison. Stacy, greetings again.
Well, good afternoon, Al, and to all the listeners of Insight News and Black Press of America. I am the senior national correspondent, not the national editor, just to clarify that. Don't give me another job, Al. But we are absolutely looking forward to the discussion with the Attorney General. You know, he made a couple of appearances with us last year prior to the start of this trial. And one of the things that one of the many things, Al, that impressed us about the Attorney General was how transparent he was. And he made it clear that he wanted to not try the Derek Chauvin in the media. He wanted to try him in the courtroom. He wanted to make sure that there was no reason to have the case in any way dismissed. You know, that was always a possibility, to looking for dismissals on certain grounds, technicalities, if you will. But Keith Ellison was very, very diligent and really put together such a team that was so meticulous and very, very precise in what they set out to do, and they accomplished it.
Babington, jump in. Let me ask you to greet and welcome Stacy Brown to our program today and to our community, and actually the Black Press. Babington, you and I are doing work here locally to lift up the historic and positive and powerful meaningful relationship between the Black press and the Black church. The project that we're going to be doing as part of this program today is a look at how we bring our voices together to examine our history, our legacy, and to plot courses towards futures that honor and respect our dignity as human beings, our history and our legacy, and create a bright, brilliant, engaged future for our people. Take a minute, if you would, Babington, to talk about the Stair Step Foundation and his works united and what we'll be covering later today in our town hall.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, my dear brother Al. Welcome, Brother Stacy Brown. These are critical times. I don't think anyone could deny it. They've been thrust upon us. We're meeting situations that we never even imagined could exist. If we went back 16 months, or I don't even know what the accurate time frame is, but none of us were looking for the ravages on our schedules and our processes that this coronavirus ushered in. And as we were staggering with that, then we get hit by the realities of the fact that we are still a very disjointed society in which the disparities that assail Black folk in particular were brought into stark relief. And so here we are working with this moment in time. And I'm glad, Al, that you offer us the opportunity to dialogue about these matters. And I want to just piggyback for a second on what my brother Stacy Brown mentioned in reference to Attorney General Keith Ellison, who he wasn't homegrown, but we have fully claimed him. He was born in Detroit. His folk, I think, from some southern parish where they do gumbo, but we have fully embraced Keith Ellison, and he's fully embraced us. And I don't want to digress too much, Al, but two things I do want to mention, both in respect to Keith and respect to Chief Madera Arredondo in this situation we're facing with George Floyd. Chief Arredondo, George Floyd died on a Monday night, and Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., he had gathered community leaders, Chief Arredondo had, into his offices with the mayor, had the BCA present, had the FBI present, and we're kind of just alerting us, debriefing us on both what had happened and then the process going forward, Al. And several folk were there of the community, and said to Chief Arredondo, we're glad you have the BCA and the FBI here, but they haven't served us these 4 decades. We have all kinds of indications of places where they were missing in action when we desperately needed them. We're not looking to them, Chief, we're looking to you. What are you gonna do? And the interesting thing is the chief obviously was not a judge. He was not a jury. He couldn't try and convict these fellows, but he did have it in his power. And we challenged him to fire them, something that hadn't been done anywhere in the country. He wrestled with some of the human resource issues, determined he could, and he did fire them. We said to the mayor, if he fires them, are you going to stand with him? Mayor Fry, to his credit, said, absolutely. These folks should be fired, arrested, and tried. So we are living out with a great celebration about the fact we have a Chief Arredondo, and then we have Attorney General Keith Ellison. So once they had been fired, once they are now charged, we had our champion again, who stepped up to the task and decided that he would in fact prosecute them. And he did it with selflessness. You know, he didn't seek the spotlight for himself, but he sought to put together an excellent team of prosecutors in this community that came forward, and they did the job. And he led that charge. And so we're so very proud of him, Stacy. He's ours. Where are you from, Stacy?
New York.
He's here. He's from Minneapolis. Okay? The mini apple.
How about that?
Babington, thanks. That's a great backstory. And the point is, what's so wonderful is that the public doesn't get that story. That's the story behind the story, what happens, in the community, and how relationships matter, and how contact and how access matters. And that's really the point here, I think, because in history, we have not had the access to the leverage of power. And here's what happens when you have the power seat, when you are in it and you're able to bring to bear your sense of what justice looks like. Stacey, any questions or comments on that part so far?
No, I think Babington said a mouthful and then some. The job that Minneapolis leaders like the mayor, like the police chief did, it's an example for others around the country, as we still see situations like that of George Floyd still happening. The day of the verdict, we saw what happened, I believe, was it Columbus, Ohio. And so it continues to happen. We saw a video come out of Florida in which police officers, two young, innocent Black young men who were headed home on their bikes, made them get on the ground, pointing guns at them, no threat whatsoever, made one of them crawl. Now, you know how dehumanizing that is. So while it's great to hear that you had Minneapolis champions in Minneapolis, like the Attorney General, like the police chief, like the mayor, step up, that has to become contagious throughout the country.
And Stacy, if I might say something else that needs to become contagious, it's so easy for us, Al, to be trapped in the moment. So easy for us to be carried away with the passion of this hour. But I appreciated some of the things that Attorney General Keith Ellison said on the 60-minute interview. First of all, I thought he was pitch perfect on that interview. He indicated first and foremost that he was not in any of this process seeking revenge, but he was seeking accountability, which is a critical matter for us in wherever we are in this society. We desperately need everyone to accept accountability for their role in the effort, And my brother just came on, but let me say one other thing about him before I get off. And that is the other thing he said. He drew us to this place where he said, everybody's human. So at some point, we've got to come to grips with that. If the world's to be better, if we're to be better, we got to start looking at each other as human beings.
Babington, I think I did one of the last public interviews that Attorney General Ellison made before the trial began. And we were interviewing on another public affairs topic, but obviously I could not ask him about the trial. And he was accommodating and responded, consistent with his obligation to be fair and balanced, and the responsibility and accountability he had to the court and to justice. But one thing I remember from that conversation, and Keith, I'll ask you to talk about this as well, is you said that you were committed to Derek Chauvin getting the very best representation he could have and having the best trial to pursue his claim and to maintain and try to support and defend his claim of innocence. And that struck me as what a high mind, Keith Ellison, to walk into this with that understanding that, in a sense, you represent both wings of the symbol of justice, right? The balancing and the weighing, that above it all and through it all, there has to be a fairness accorded to everybody involved in this. I'm so pleased that you're here. Keith Ellison, thank you so much for being here. I think Stacy Brown. If you don't, please meet him.
Hey, Stacy.
He's the national correspondent for NNPA. And by the way, we are actually by Facebook sharing this with the Black Press of America. So we're not only streaming locally to the Insight News Facebook audiences and our YouTube channel, that we're reaching the country at Black Press USA NNPA. So we
That's
thank
great.
you for doing that.
That's awesome. Let me say Reverend Babington Johnson. I don't, good to see you, my brother.
We've got a team of people in the background waiting to come on after you, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I wanted to greet my brother. That's it.
Keep this. Let me say this, Al, that Dr. Chauvin sends his greetings as well.
Oh yeah, my brother. That's my brother.
He sends his greetings.
Yeah, well, send him back. I'm a big fan of his. He's a great man.
Certainly will.
So Keith, let me begin just with the interview that I had planned with you and am planning, and I've invited Stacey Brown and Babington to share this responsibility with me. So it's a conversation like we always do. We just talk, right? And talk about what we experience, what we know, what we believe, and what we have passion about. And I want to ask you to respond to that last conversation that I referred to. What about the question of making sure we have a genuine, articulated responsibility that we take seriously? Talk about that and what you said to me before and what has happened.
Well, look, because of Derek Chauvin's demonstration of inhumanity to George Floyd, doesn't mean we're going to be inhumane to him. We're just. We believe in justice. We believe in mercy. We believe in all these things. Now, that does not mean that we don't believe in accountability. We do believe in accountability. Everybody has to explain what they do. The problem with our society is that, some people are held extremely accountable for any little thing, and even some things they didn't do. That'd be us, and there's other folks who seem to get away with whatever they want to do. And that's and the problem is inadequate justice, that the scales of justice are not balanced. I feel perfectly confident that Derek Chauvin got a fair trial. I never wanted him to get anything else. He had a full, free, and fair opportunity to be heard, cross-examined every witness, was able to participate in jury selection, everything. And the court went above and beyond to make sure he got a fair trial. And despite him getting a fair trial, he was found guilty on all counts beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury of his peers. And that's justice in my mind. I mean, in the overarching theme, it's I don't believe that this is an adequate outcome because it's one case. We've got to make fairness the norm. We need to make fairness what we expect to happen, not what we're like, whoa, how'd that fairness happen? That never happens. No, we want fairness to be like, well, of course, right? But there's so much more to go. During the case, we saw the loss of the precious life of young Mr. Wright, Dante Wright, 20 years old, young dad, parents who loved him when he was on the phone. He's calling his mom. And then of course we've seen Andre Brown. Looks like that was a horrific case. The young woman Makai, looks like her life was taken, and I mean there's so many cases, and so what it really means, if you add it all up, is that the system of government, the state, seems to believe that using excessive force against African Americans is a regular thing to do. Now, why would that be? Well, is it connected to 250 years of bondage and servitude, 100 years of Jim Crow? Now we're living under 60 years of disparities in everything, housing, policing, everything, And so it's just the legacy that we're living, but we're not discouraged and we're not cynical. We still wake up every morning praying for justice, expecting justice, fighting for justice.
Babington, go ahead.
Keith, let me ask you a little behind the scenes question on two levels in respect to the attorneys.
Yeah.
First of all, I think we would, all of us, be educated and intrigued to hear you talk about what you were thinking about and how you put together your team. And then either before or after, briefly touching upon the defense team. Was it just Nelson? was he a lone ranger? So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, so the thing is that when Hubert Humphrey was the Attorney General in Minnesota, he had a criminal division that was 15, 16 people. Our office is less than half of that now when it comes to criminal prosecutors. And the 7 metro counties and plus Olmsted County, which is where Rochester is, and Duluth, which is St. Louis County, they're in a position to take care of their own homicides. We take the rest of them. So I knew that in order for us to put on the best case that we could, it would make sense for me to see if I can get some special attorneys general to come in. And, Jerry Blackwell and I worked on the Max Mason posthumous pardon. For those of you who aren't from Minnesota, you may never have heard of Max Mason. Well, in 1921, there was a lynching of 3 Black circus workers in Duluth, Minnesota. And the lynching so embarrassed the city that they needed to justify the lynching. So they said, well, there really was a rape of this woman, and that Black man did it. Well, he didn't do anything. That he was convicted, as you would expect, but the trial court judge and the prosecutor both wrote letters to the pardon board to get him out because he didn't do this, and they were denied. So here we sought a posthumous pardon for Max Mason, and Jerry and I worked on that. We went down to the lynching museum, the great Professor Stevenson has pulled together in Montgomery, Alabama. We talked to them about having some replica coffins put on display to memorialize the lynchings that happened. And we worked on a number of things. So when this matter came up, I said, hey man, you've been doing pretty good with that law degree, in the world of accumulation, nothing wrong with that. A workman's worth is higher, huh, Reverend?
I think that's true.
Yeah, but there's a time when we need you to come into service for the public, and he stepped up and did it, man, and bless that brother. He's so good. Slisher, he is a lawyer at Maslin Law Firm, big silk stocking law firm, full service law firm. He's not missing no meals. He's doing really, really well. And I said, Steve, you've been in public service for 20 years. You've prosecuted police. I need you to help me out on this. He said, you can count on me. Neil Katyal. Some of y'all who hang around Washington, D.C. know who Neil Katyal is. Neil was the former United States Solicitor General in the Obama administration. He said, if you got an appeal or a research issue, I'm on it. I'm an expert in appeals. If it wasn't for Neil, we may not have ever gotten that 3rd-degree murder charge. Mm. And then there was this young woman, Afro-Latina sister from Puerto Rico, born in Madison, Wisconsin, but her parents are from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And her name is Lola Velasquez. She works at Medtronic, expert in heart, lung, all the law that goes along with the body. She knows it. Real smart. The world didn't see her, but she wrote up all of the outlines for direct examinations, the cross examinations, helped us find all those medical witnesses. She said, you need a cardiologist, you need a pulmonologist, you need an emergency room doctor. She's like, wow, we're like, wow, go. And, and she made sure that there was no question as to the cause of death. So we had an all-star team, plus my own team here at the AG's office. They did their role. Matt Frank, as the leader of our criminal division, did a wonderful job. And so my theory was I needed to be more of a manager of a baseball team than a player. Y'all who know me know I am a trial lawyer. I love trying cases. I worked on the strategy. I worked on the ordering of witness. I worked on the arguments that we needed to make. I worked on all the aspects of the case, but I decided that I'm going to push other people forward to do that because we had great lawyers, and sometimes you need somebody who can look at the whole picture so that you can see, because when you're in it, you get a certain perspective. But when you're not in it, but you're standing right next to it, you can kind of get a better vision how it's all coming together. And that was the role that I played. So I was honored to play it. I'm humbled by your confidence. And as Reverend Babington knows, I called him and said, could you have the pastors pray for us? Because we sure need it. And hey, the prayers of the righteous availeth much.
Come on now.
Right?
Keith,
So there you go.
Side,
Oh, well, look, Eric Nelson had the entire police federation. He had a group of 12 lawyers he consulted with on a regular basis. Their medical examiner, the one from South Africa, who said that George Floyd maybe died from carbon monoxide poisoning. He's all of their medical expert, right? And he had the help of 12 other people. Plus, he had another lawyer in the courtroom that he never asked to do anything except sit in the room and take notes. So he tried the case the way he wanted to try the case. See what I'm saying? Every lawyer makes strategic decisions. I decided to, get the best people I could. He decided to do it all himself. That's his decision. That's his call. And I don't question it.
and Keith, what would you think or say was perhaps the most challenging part of the process?
Well, the most challenging thing was the pro-police bias that we all have to a certain extent. Now, we were raised on Law and Order. I used to watch black and white episodes of Dragnet.
Yeah.
You saw the Mod Squad, right? And we all had dare officers in the school we went to. We're just programmed to just believe that if an officer says something, that it's true and that they would never do anything bad. Well, if you're African American, you have another perspective on that issue. But we needed people to just overcome the institutional bias that is associated with that profession, but because we knew the evidence was strong. I mean, the people who were assembled on May 25th on the corner of 38th in Chicago. Many of them were nervous and scared when they found out that it was going to be televised. They were like, I don't want no part of that. I don't want to be in the limelight. I want to just lead a quiet life. I don't want nobody bothering me when I go to lunch or dinner or getting stopped. I don't want it. And we had to help them feel like, look, you can do this. It's the right thing to do. You did the right thing when you stopped and took out your video camera. We need you to do the right thing again. And it wasn't easy. We had to prepare juvenile witnesses. And that's hard. If anybody who's listening who's a lawyer knows you can't just question a child the same way you do an adult. Anybody knows that. And so we had to get them ready for the experience. I want to thank Judge Cahill for not requiring them to be on camera. That was important. And quite frankly, I didn't want the case on video, on TV. I actually was one of those who said, you know what, TV changes how the lawyers act, but it ended up being the right decision. And I'm not afraid to admit that, I learned something, that you can conduct a TV on trial without people showing out, without scaring off the witnesses. And it ended up being a good thing. So as long as there was flexibility for vulnerable witnesses, I'm fine with the way it went with that.
Fantastic.
Let's see, Keith, how did you feel about not specifically, in my view, addressing the question of race in the trial, or did you?
Right.
My sense was Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Al. I was going to say there's a Minnesota Supreme Court opinion that says that for prosecution to inject race in a case could be reversible error in prosecutorial misconduct. So we didn't want to go anywhere near that, So that's thing one. And then here's thing two. All of us in life have to ask ourselves, do we want to make a point or do we want to make a difference? And obviously, anybody with eyes, anybody who's with any basic common sense knows that institutional racism was what this case is really all about. right? But we had a specific task, and that is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin was guilty of killing George Floyd on May 25th, and he was guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. And we had 12 jurors who we were making that case to. We weren't making a case to the general public. We were making a case to 12 specific people. And we made that case to them. And so people are smart. You know, they know that this case is shot through with racial institutional racism. But, you know, but for the task we had at hand, if I'd have got up there and argued the societal, historic, racial dynamics of this case, we could have made that point and lost the case. It would be better to win the case, I think, right? And then sort of help people understand the larger context of the case. But so at least we kept the main thing the main thing.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Our guest today is Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison. We're talking about the recently concluded Derek Chauvin trial. My colleagues today in this call include Stacey Brown, who's the national correspondent of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. We call it the Black Press of America, and Alfred Babington Johnson, leader of the Fair Step Initiative and his Works United. Following this, we're going to go into a town hall meeting. We've got a panel of esteemed workers and leaders in the community standing by to join this conversation. And we're going to talk particularly about the whole question of protests in our community. Attorney General Ellison, as long as you can stay with us, please do, because we love to have you as long as you're able to be with us. Stacey, you had a question.
Yeah, I got a minute. I'll stick around.
Great. Well, Keith, you mentioned about the, as we all know, about how police officers generally are given the benefit of the doubt. They are believed before anybody else, whether it's in the courtroom or anywhere else. Were you at all surprised that Chauvin did not elect to have a trial by judge instead of a trial by jury?
Well, you know, we do see people pursue that strategy sometimes. We see that from time to time because, you know, I mean, quite candidly, you know, the judges are familiar with the police officers, get to know them, get familiar with them, feel a certain degree of affinity for them. And that was something that was a possibility. I mean, I think it was right and just to have a jury. Glad they did, but we were preparing in any case. And so, but that's something you got to be ready for because there was a case years ago in St. Paul where the officer was charged with excessive force on a handcuffed person in custody, hit the guy in the face as he was handcuffed to a chair. I don't know if y'all remember that case. And the judge said, well, he's not guilty. And, I was like, wait a minute. You just let that guy walk from that? And I mean, but so that happens. But I'm gonna tell you this, no judge would want to be the sole fact finder in this case.
Yeah.
How does that
I bet you the person most happy that there was a jury is the judge.
So what kind of pressure does the judge have going into the sentencing? Is that his decision alone? How's that process work?
Well, it is. He gets the final say on that. So what'll happen is, and there is a trial, and there is a sentencing date of June 16th, I believe. And we as a state have filed notice of what we call aggravating factors. And those aggravating factors are, number one, it was done in front of children, minors. Two, Derek Chauvin as a police officer was in a position of trust and authority. Three, the act was particularly cruel as Derek Chauvin ignored 27 pleas from George Floyd to breathe. Four, that it was an act done in a group, more than one person. And then five, it was so I think I'm my mind's blanking on the last one, but those were the ones: cruelty, child, position of trust, did it in a group, and the fifth one will come to me in a moment. But those factors justify the court going above the sentencing guidelines. Now, the sentencing guidelines in Minnesota call for a sentence of 150 months. And the judge is legally allowed to exceed that if those factors are found to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And so if the court finds that beyond a reasonable doubt, the act was committed in front of children, beyond a reasonable doubt, it was an act committed by a person in a position of trust. Oh, the last one is George Floyd was particularly vulnerable. He was particularly vulnerable. So vulnerability, trust, children, group, and cruelty. Those are the five. And if he finds it, any one or all of those are proven beyond a reasonable doubt, that will justify what they call an upward departure. And as I said, I don't think it's right for the state to seek revenge against any defendant, but I do think it's right for the state to ask for an appropriate sentence based on conduct. And that's what we're looking for.
Who's going to pay? Who paid for the defense? We mentioned there was one defense attorney, the voice of the defense, but you mentioned there was a team there. And so give us a sense of how that defense was paid for and what it costs, if you can.
Well, I mean, it's well known that the Police Federation has a fund to fund these defenses. So that's what I assume.
Okay. Any idea what the cost is for this? You might not know that.
No, I don't know that. That would be subject to attorney-client privilege. They don't even have. I'm going to have to come up. I will have to publish a bill for what I spent. They don't have to.
Okay. And what did you spend?
Hey, and there's Dr. Ben Chavis. How you doing, Dr. Ben?
Let me bring Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis on. He's the president of our National Newspaper Publishers Association. Dr. Ben, good afternoon. Thank you for breaking away to get on this call. It's so important to have you here and your voice. You're muted, I think.
Uh-oh.
There you go. It takes me to silence Ben Chavis. Nothing else can.
You were on for a second and off again, so we're not hearing your voice right now. And maybe Chauvin, you can help him.
Yeah. In the meantime, Keith Ellison, you mentioned earlier too about what's going on nationwide. Really, there was a report that was just published in Science News, and it mentioned the researchers examined almost 3 million officer shifts and 1.6 million enforcement activities performed by about 7,000 officers from 2012 to 2015. The team looked at how officers of different backgrounds behave while patrolling the same neighborhood at the same time of day of week, month, and year. And they found that, of course, Black officers, Hispanic officers, and women officers had far fewer police stops, far fewer arrests, and far fewer use of force. I think, Keith,
I read that article.
Doesn't that tell us something too about policing and perhaps maybe we should have cops who live in the neighborhood, patrol the neighborhood? Is that an indication of that?
Yeah, I certainly think you've got to have every police department look like the people they're policing, for sure. Now, that is important. I don't think it's all we need, but it's certainly one of the things that we need. And, I'm struck by this case where there was a Black female police officer in Buffalo, New York, who intervened to stop what she recognized as excessive force. She does not get a commendation. She gets a condemnation, gets fired, and has to sue to get her pension back.
Yeah.
So when we've got, if you're going to have officers intervene to stop other officers from doing illegal and improper things, you're going to have to create an environment where they will do that, and that means incentives. And one of those incentives is that you hold people accountable who violate the rules, and you promote people who obey the rules. And every Minneapolis police officer is required to intervene when they see another officer doing the wrong thing. Every Minneapolis police officer is required to render medical aid. I mean, in this case, we proved in court that George Floyd was without a pulse in the last 3 minutes. Nobody turned him over to give him chest compressions. And all of the officers had hours and hours and hours of CPR training. How do they justify this? It's just wrong. I'm hoping that this case does send a message that you need to obey the rules, or you might find the police chief and a whole bunch of your colleagues testifying against you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Ben, are you there now?
Yes, can you hear me now?
There he is.
Perfectly. Good to see you. Thank you.
Hey, Doc.
I just wanted to say to the Honorable Keith Ellison, salute, my man. You and your team did an excellent
Right back,
job.
brother.
So very proud of you. And I speak on behalf not only of the Black press, but all of Black America. We're so proud of the dignity and integrity, the way you handle the situation in Minneapolis. And if we had other attorney generals like you, you may need to help your colleague in North Carolina, because they're having a serious situation there where they are refusing to release the video and other things. But my whole purpose, I know you had a great discussion with Al and others in states. I just wanted to say on behalf of the Black press, we are very proud of you.
Well, thank you. I do thank you. And I just stand in humility, grateful to God that I'm able to be here and do the best I can.
And I just want to say, Al, at our national convention in June, we want to give Attorney General Keith Ellison our highest award. So be on the lookout. The Black press intends to salute you. I don't think that would violate your oath of office. There's no monetary, but we just want to say thank you for your leadership.
Well, I'm humbled and honored. And I would, if you all decide to do that, I would have to say that it's an award on behalf of the whole prosecution team.
Yes, absolutely.
Ben, we're going to go into a conversation momentarily with elders and leaders in our community about the history of protests and about the value of protests and how we both claim and preserve the strategies of effective protest without being derailed, side-railed, infiltrated. One of the things that all of us have watched and talked about over the past year is in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities set afire, burning. But the impression at the street level is that the burning wasn't done or led by Black people, rather led by people that had other interests, other agendas. Some identified themselves as anarchists or as even white supremacists with the intent of provoking confrontation. And so you've got particular personal history in the world of protest and the philosophy of protest. Let me ask you to make a comment about that first of all, and then I want to ask Brother Babington to talk about the declaration of his church, His Works United leadership group that will be doing the town hall as part of this conversation today. Dr. Ben, what do you think? The history, the context, how do we protect and preserve our capacity to effectively deploy the protest, but not be side-railed?
Well, I think we should always be very forthright with our protests and state very clearly that our protests are to be nonviolent, that our protests are to be principled, that our protests have to respect the family of those who have been victimized, that our protests should always take the high road and not let anyone divert us or make us engage in things where then the protest becomes a diversion from justice rather than a complement of the demand for justice. I think that's so important. And a lot of times in our anger, which is justified, in our outrage, which is justified, we have to make sure we channel our anger and channel our outrage into something that's constructive, something that's positive, so we can achieve our goal. Dr. King said it best, that protests are a means through which we address our demands for freedom, justice, and equality. But it's how we protest and when we protest, and we have to be strategic. You should never play into the hands of those who are just waiting to get a license to oppress you more. And so we have to always be mindful, and we should learn from past protests. I think the importance of Black history and the importance of African history is that we learn from it. We don't necessarily have to repeat it. We learn from our history, and then we create a better future based on the learnings from our history.
I'm going to ask Brother Babington to join in because he's prepared to share this powerful letter that they actually published this Monday as a full-page letter to the community. The Stair Step Initiative has a leadership role in a coalition of pastoral leaders called His Works United. And as a group, they've come forward making a declaration, an invitation for our community to step up and step into our legacy of righteousness, I believe. And what I want to do, Babington, is have you read that if you're ready to do that. I'm going to ask you, Ben, and Keith, if you're able to stick around, stay as long as you can, and have you react to it as well. But then after this is read, we'll do a station ID at the top of the hour and then resume and look for reaction, plus others in the studio waiting to join this conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Thank you for being with us here on KFAI, and thank you for being with us online at the Insight News YouTube channel, at the Facebook page for Insight News, and also you may be joining us from the NNPA national website, Black Press USA NNPA. We thank you for paying attention to these critical issues. Brother Babington.
Thank you, Al. I want to read this open letter to our community, to our village. And let me just say, signatory to this are the policy board of His Works United, which includes Bishop Richard Howell, who is the diocesan bishop of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World, Reverend Dr. Billy Russell, who's the president of the Minnesota State Baptist Convention, Reverend Dr. James Thomas, who's the president of the St. Paul Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance Black, Reverend Stacy Smith, who's presiding elder of the St. Paul, Minneapolis district of the AME Church, Bishop Fred W. Washington, who's the bishop of the Church of God in Christ and jurisdictional prelate, and Reverend Dr. Ronnie Patterson, who's president-elect of the Minnesota State Baptist Convention. To the village. In the first 6 months of 2020, while the world was reeling from an introduction to COVID-19, headlines record that the ongoing pandemic of violence perpetrated against African Americans continued. Say the names: Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rashad Brooks, Dante Wright, Andrew Brown Jr. This correspondence has three purposes. First, to proclaim solidarity in our village. We stand together with the young activists and the long-term warriors, with outraged mothers and fathers, with the concerned laborers, managers, and entrepreneurs of our village, and we demand change. We rebuke the spirit that denies the humanity and dignity of African Americans. We reject the overly aggressive attitudes and behaviors that allow what should be simple traffic stops of African Americans to be life-threatening encounters. We reject the notion that disparities in economic resources, healthcare, education, and suppression of voting should be allowed to continue. The murder of George Floyd has brought focus, but whatever the ultimate outcome of the trials and the verdicts with Derek Chauvin and the other officers, the community will need to build our ability to continue to fight oppression and disparate treatment. Our second point, justice, the end of police killings of Black men and women and other persons of color, equal access to resources, and relief from disparities in health, education, jobs, housing, etc., require our raised voices, and protest is a vital tool. We have a rich history of accomplishments that occurred through nonviolent protest during the modern civil rights era. We affirm, encourage, and will continue to join in nonviolent protest to call attention to critical issues. We are encouraged by the energy and conviction of all of our people, and we are gratified by, to use the language of Attorney General Keith Ellison, by the bouquet of allies that walk with us. The third observation is that our efforts to achieve good outcomes are being perverted by those who are not allies to our cause. The presence of white supremacists that set fires and anarchies that caused difficulties and disruptions during the nights of protests following the George Floyd murder are well documented. These undermining actions continue to occur here in Minnesota and throughout the country. We must move strategically to ensure that our voice will not be silenced or distorted, and our energies will not be frustrated. The successes of the modern civil rights movement came through strategic planning and coalition building among the leading racial justice organizations and the practice of discipline. We need to apply those lessons to the current situation. We must act to prevent the disruption of services and access to goods that occurs when grocery stores, banks, and gas stations in our community are closed after a night or two of looting, and community residents have to travel great distances to meet basic needs. Looting at Walmart in Brooklyn Center was followed by the next night boarding of Walmarts as far away as Cottage Grove. We suggest that there are tactics we should employ to gain the victory we need. The first adjustment should be to take away the cloak of darkness that allows those infiltrating our protests to wreak havoc. Schedule protests as required, but end before dark and return the next day. After the murder of George Floyd, mass protests took place throughout the nation and in many parts of the world as the legitimacy for concerns of justice and appropriate behavior by the police gained volume. Time after time, well-attended, nonviolent protests deteriorated while outsiders, opportunists, white supremacists, or anarchists inserted themselves, distorted the discussion, and diluted the righteous indignation that's necessary for change. Wisdom would dictate that we move to defang the ability of the enemies of justice to detour our efforts. We suggest that organizers and leaders of protests strip the ability of our adversaries to use the cover of darkness to throw their rocks and hide their hands. We should gather in great numbers whenever a cause rises that requires the attention that nonviolent protests can bring. But as protest leaders and organizations, we should set strict times for the involvement of legitimate allies and deny interlopers the benefit of blending in to do their mischief. We have much to do, and we must challenge the complacency of any that choose to be blind to growing atrocities or deaf to the call of meaningful change. Let us continue to reason together and work together with those with a heart for the peace that comes from justice. And let us operate with wisdom so that our good efforts are not distorted by those that mean us no good.
Thank you, Brother Babington. That full text is in Insight News as a guest commentary, and the synopsis of it appears as a paid advertisement by the pastoral group, by His Works United, in Insight News as well this week. I've got about a minute before the top of the hour. I'm going to ask Attorney General Ellison, you've got to leave right at 2 o'clock, to take a minute or two to react to that, or impressions, thoughts. What directions do you offer our community considering the whirlwind of activity around us right now? Keith Ellison?
Well, Al, I want to thank the Black pastors. You know, the Black pastors have been there, man. They have been there when there's a lot of folks, been there when there's nobody, and all you got is calling pastor up to give comfort and aid. And I want to thank you, Babington, and the team of pastors that you work with every day in your work. You guys have also done a lot of important work on voting that we've done together. One day we got to talk about that, given the assault on voting rights. But let me just say, in terms of protests, I mean, Martin Luther King never was elected to any office, but he shook the country more than any elected official. And so protests and activists are really critical, but I would commend folks to read the COINTELPRO papers. Ben Chavis is an expert in the COINTELPRO. There are people who, in this last round of protests, there was a white guy put on a face mask, had an umbrella, and was breaking windows and was burning up the stores. Some of the activists confronted him and say, "What are you doing, man? We're talking about justice for George Floyd." And then he got into a confrontation. The guy ran away, then he got caught, and then was found to be a member of a white supremacist group. I would just say to the activists, we need you. Understand the agent provocateur. and understand the role of the agent provocateur, understand that you can be infiltrated by people who want to divert attention away from the righteous protest of the people. You got to be on the alert for that. I am very sorry. I have to excuse myself. Nothing but love for you, brothers and sisters, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Very
Thank
good.
you,
Thank you,
Keith
my man.
Ellison. Ben, if you can wait 1 minute, let me do a station ID. I want you to react to before you have to leave, I'm sure. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Let me toss it to Mason at the station for top of the hour, and we'll be back in a minute.
1 minute after 2 o'clock, it is Fresh Air Community Radio, KFAI 90.3 FM, HD Minneapolis, and on the web at kfai.org. We will be back after these announcements.
KFAI is supported by Minnesota State. With 30 community and technical colleges across the state, including 13 in the Twin Cities Metro, Minnesota State offers small classes and options for all types of students. Minnesota State has hundreds of scholarships available for classes in high-demand career fields like manufacturing, transportation, and healthcare. More information about Minnesota State and the Workforce Development Scholarships at minstate.edu.
Programming is supported in part by Granada Theater, presenting Day Drinking with Mom, a Mother's Day brunch paired with comedy and mimosas. Hosted by comedians Wendy Mayberry and Karen Pickering on May 7th at 7 p.m. More at granadampls.eventbrite.com.
2 minutes after 2 o'clock, Fresh Air Community Radio. Normally you would hear Lady J in this spot, but we are presenting an extended Conversations with Al McFarlane. We go now to Al McFarlane.
Thank you, Mason. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome back to Conversations with Al McFarlane. We proceed this part of the program with what we have presented and are presenting as a town hall. And my partner in the town hall is His Works United, the Stair Step Foundation, led by Alfred Babington Johnson. Brother Babington, always good to see you. I don't know what his time commitment is, but I'm so glad to have a few minutes of Dr. Benjamin Chavis, a legendary organizer, leader in the civil rights world, but also in our profession of media. And Dr. Ben, I would like for you to react as Keith Ellison did to the letter to the community. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And I'll put one more thing on your plate right now. And I've shared this with Babington, and I want you to share it if you would. There is a historic and powerful relationship between the Black press and the Black church. What we're doing here is consistent with the tradition of effective change. And address that, if you would, yes. Consistent with responding to the letter to the community.
Well, thank you. As I listened to Brother Babington read the letter to the community, I immediately thought about Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from the Birmingham jail that was addressed actually to pastors and to the community who had criticized him for using young people in protests. That's why he wrote the letter from the Birmingham jail, which was one of his most eloquent writings. And I Have a Dream speech was one of his most famous speeches, but his one of the famous eloquent writing was a letter from the Birmingham jail. And I would say, Brother Babington, the spirit and the text of the letter you just read was so on point, theologically on point, sociologically on point. And I think that we should distribute that letter out, not only in Minneapolis, but in many communities. And your second point, the relationship between the Black press and the Black church. Keep in mind, 194 years ago, on March 16, 1827, Freedom's Journal emerged out of the Black church. Cornish was a pastor, a Black pastor. And the Black church and the Black press, from the very beginning of these institutions, have always worked together. And certainly today, we should close ranks.
Amen.
Tighten up our relationships between the Black press and the Black church. Two vital institutions that serve the interests of African Americans, all people of African descent, not only in the United States, but in the Caribbean and throughout the world. My closing comment Al and Brother Badminton, is that what happened in Minneapolis, in a positive sense, the protests certainly put the pressure on the system.
Amen.
And the fact that the clergy stood with the protesters. A lot of times in the past, there's been a strategy to divide the protesters from the church or the church from the protesters. And even sometimes to divide the press from the protesters.
Mm-hmm.
But what I saw in Minneapolis was so positive. I saw the kind of solidarity, the kind of unity among community leaders. And our young people there, those millennials, those Generation Z, I'm hoping that they will in turn support the Black church and support the Black press. Because in their time of activism, the Black press and the Black church was certainly there, shoulder to shoulder, bearing witness in the protests, bearing witness in the courtroom, bearing witness in the city council and all the other places, and certainly with the family, the Floyd family themselves. And same thing with the family of Dante Wright. So I think that we have to not only capture this moment, Al and Brother Badminton, but I think we should also codify it in a way so that we can build upon the foundation that has now been built in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. I think we have a foundation that we can build upon so that on the one hand, we demand justice, and on the other hand, we demand equity. And where equity and justice intersect is in the empowerment of our people and the empowerment of our community, where we now need to rebuild some of those places that were torn down. There's an opportunity. Out of the ashes should emerge structures that are African-American owned, African-American financed, African-American supplied. As you know, a lot of the difficulty happens in our community when we lose control of the businesses of the community. And I don't want to elaborate on that too much. I would just say that after the Los Angeles ride, after the Detroit ride, after the Chicago ride, after the Newark ride, I could just go on down. If you go to Baltimore, there are places in Baltimore today in 2021 that have not been rebuilt since 1968. So we have to be thy brother and thy sister's keeper. I'm a preacher. Don't stop me to preaching because I'm already late for another meeting. But I just want to thank you for an opportunity to respond to what I think is an excellent letter. And I think is a great initiative by the pastors to write such a letter to a community that needs to hear from our church leaders. And I believe that there will be a tremendous response to the letter from the community, from the pastors.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you so much. Dr. Chavis, thank you so much for your leadership and for being here. We're going to continue with the program and move into our town hall. Stay as long as you're able to. Kelvin, you can let the people. Okay, thank you so much. We'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Kelvin, you can let the other people who are standing by for the town hall into the studio, and we'll continue with the program. What a wonderful program so far. I am pleased and happy with what we've come across, what we've done, the conversations we've had so far, and I'm pleased with the direction that we're taking. And as I indicated, there are several people that are standing by to be part of our town hall discussion. We'll bring them online right now. I see Reverend Richard Coleman and Sister Maya Marshall is here. Lily Rankin, some of you don't know her, but I'll introduce you to her. Pastor Billy Russell. Great men and women and young people as part of this conversation. Badminton, let me start by having you introduce this august panel, and I'll introduce Lily because she's part of my team.
Okay, first, I'm delighted, Al, to be able to say that we're here with my brother, the Reverend Dr. Billy Russell, who has, he's trying to act as if he's moving to a new space in that he is having retirement celebrations we have had a dialogue in the community and decided he's not going anywhere. And so he hasn't known this until now, but you're not going anywhere, Dr. Russell. But he's been a long-term partner, and he is the president of the State Baptist Convention and a great man of God, and I call him a quiet storm for what he's accomplished. And he has been standing side by side with us in all of these deliberations. I want to mention my brother, the Reverend Dr. Richard Coleman, who in point of fact is really sort of a co-founder of the work we now call His Works United, because back in 1995, when there was a gang killing and a young man laying in the streets all day long, I was so grieved, and I called my brother Richard Coleman, and I called Brian Herron, who at that time was a city councilman. I said, "What do we got to do something?" And and anyway, out of that was birthed His Works United at this point. And I have to pause inside when I talk about this young lady, Maya Marshall. I'm in awe of her, quite honestly. I get nervous when I'm around her. She's that great. And a couple of Sundays ago, we were at a kind of a prayer vigil. Dr. Coleman was there, Bishop Howell, a lot of us at the government center, and a lot of the young civil rights leaders. And Maya was there, who was going to share. And I had a chance to talk to her about something that was just heavy on my heart. And it's exactly this, the fact that the protests are so necessary, but I was so grieved by the fact that we were being taken advantage of, I felt. And we sat and talked for a while, and I really wanted to run it past her, because I consider her to be a great thermometer, an indicator of what her generation is thinking, because she's a thought influencer. And so really, as a result of our dialogue, came sort of an internal permission to go forward to our policy board and put forward this letter, which we then sent. So Maya is a storm. So Lily.
Well, let me do this. Maya, I had a chance to, at Babington's suggestion, look at the video work you've done. I know you work in a lot of different platforms, but one that I think is particularly powerful is your video that talks about Breonna Taylor. What are we going to do? And it speaks to the moment, the energy, the demand, the expectation, the obligation that we have to bring our voices, our bodies, and our minds forward in pursuit of justice. And what I want to do before I come back to Reverend Russell and Reverend Coleman, and before I introduce Lily Rankin, is share the video and have you talk about that. And this conversation is just that. The town hall is a conversation. We're all going to talk with each other about how we see the world, guided by the thoughts put forth by Brother Babington, and all of us, though, free to bring in the nuance, the background, the insight that helps us all understand the power of this moment and the necessity of our engagement and the inevitability of our success. I always tell people, Babington, success is inevitable and victory is at hand. And so we stand with that moment by moment. Kelvin, if you're there, can you bring up the video by Maya Marshall? It's a tribute to, well, there it is. Yeah.
Try this shit. Until they see your honor, we do this in your honor. Until they see your honor, we do this in your honor. Until they see your honor, we do this in her honor. Until they see your honor, Breonna. If I could just keep it 100, them cops feel free because that's what they wanted. When I say they, I refer to the system. You want to change and we need a conviction. We don't need another street sign. We need police to stop being swine. This ain't about no one race or religion. They did wrong, so rock along, just don't admit it. I don't even know you, but I love you. I feel if we ever met, we probably would have been friends. Guess we'll never know, cause your life came to an end. What a tragic story, where do I begin? Until they see your honor, we do this in your honor. Until they see your honor, we do this in your honor. Until they see your honor, we do this in her honor. Until they see your honor. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. 26 shots, they ain't even knock. 26 shots, they ain't even knock. 26 shots, they ain't even knock. 26 shots, they ain't even 26 shots for them 26 years. 8 fills your body, now my eyes full of tears. Yikes, that's how they do it in the Ville. Spraying all them rounds like they on a battlefield. High behind the law, they say we don't comply. Sleeping in her bed, tell me why she died. File a false report, Louisville PD. Why y'all ain't arrest Jonathan Mattingly? Maybe it's the color of her skin. Louisville PD arrest Brett Hankerson. Again, some things never get old. Louisville PD arrest Miles Cosgrove. Until they see your honor, we do this in your honor. Until they see your honor, we do this in your honor. Until they see your honor, we do this in her honor. Until they see your honor. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. I say a little prayer for your mama. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. 26, Brianna Taylor, a 26-year-old African-American emergency medical technician, fatally shot by the Louisville Metro Police Department on March 13, 2020, by 3 plainclothes police officers on a no-knock search warrant, executing a no-knock search warrant. But get this, 26, they had the wrong address. 26, them boys had the wrong address. So until she sees justice, you can believe ain't gonna be no peace, my baby. Say her name. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Say her name. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Say her name. I say a little prayer for your mama. Say her name. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Save all your chit and your chatter. If you ain't talking Black lives, it don't matter. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Arrest the officers that murdered Brianna Taylor. Brianna, 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 say your name. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna.
Oh, what a powerful piece. Justice for Brianna. Maya, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. McFarlane. How are you?
I'm well, I'm well. Talk about that piece. What was obviously the inspiration, but how did the inspiration come to you? And what is the mission and vision of that work?
Yes, sir. So I'm an author and a creative here in Minneapolis. And usually when I feel something very strongly, I try to give it a moment just to see if, maybe I'm just being emotional or, maybe it isn't that big of a deal. And so when I heard about Brianna, that was, of course, right after, George Floyd happened. She actually was murdered previously, but we didn't hear about it until afterward. And so I went to sleep. I read the article and I was reading things on social media and it just didn't make sense to me. And I could just feel like a heaviness. And it was so heavy that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about anything else but her and how I could have been her. And how even till this day, I still could be Brianna Taylor. And so because I wasn't super active in the streets for protest, just because, extenuating circumstances and trying to be safe for elders and my family and things like that. And I felt really burdened. I was feeling guilty because I wasn't out there in the street. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do what I do best. And my form of protest is music. And so I decided to, everything that I was feeling, all the guilt, just everything that I was feeling, just the anger. I decided to put it on paper and contacted one of my friends who is an amazing producer. And this is what we came up with, Brianna Taylor, 26 shots. And so that was my form of protest. We got it out there. Not only is it it turned into kind of like an anthem just because it's not a sad, sorrowful song, although the message, you don't want to hear it, but it's upbeat and it makes you, not only bob your head, but you're listening back to the lyrics like, wait, that was wrong. Like, why did they do that? Why aren't they arrested? And it just, allows you to ruminate on those things and hopefully spark a change that makes you want to do something about it. Like Attorney General Keith Ellison alluded to earlier, he said, do you want to make a point or you want to make a difference? And I feel like a lot of the times when we protest, we are trying to make a point, but really, how are we making a difference? And I felt that is why I created that piece.
Let me ask you something, because I want to ask Lily the same thing in a minute. Maya, you come from what I call a legacy family. I know everybody in your family, and they're just great people. They're beautiful people. They're wonderful people. But I want you, if you are willing to, I didn't ask you this in advance, to just talk about who you come from. And because I think it makes a difference in what you do.
Absolutely.
So talk about your family and the legacy that you're standing on.
Wow, that's a loaded comment, because I come from such agency. And my grandmother, her name is Dr. Thelma Battle Buckner. She actually just turned 89 years old yesterday, and so she's still
what a warrior.
What a warrior. She's still hanging in there. And she's a legend just in the Twin Cities, just for the work she's done in ministry, the work she's done with music, and also just with her work with being active socially with foster care. She ran a foster care system for 30 years. All of her children, which my father is a child of hers, they all sing, they all do something musical. So I come from that. And then on my maternal side, I come from such prestigious educators. My grandfather, H.E. Formey Jr., he just had a school opened in his name in Savannah, Georgia. He was one of the first Black superintendent of schools in Savannah, Georgia. And that's what I come from. I come from education and I come from music. And I feel like I am a perfect blend of those things. So that's why you get projects such as Breonna Taylor, because of that education piece and that musical piece.
So let me introduce you now to Lily Rankin. Lily is a 16-year-old, I believe, high school student at Irondale High School. And Lily happens to be my niece, or my niece's daughter. She's like great niece, but her father is someone that all of you recognize. Her grandfather, Leon Rankin, the pioneer civil rights fighter and champion here in Twin Cities. Lily, I asked to join me on a regular show on Fridays with Black men and women who are professionals in the psychology area to talk about the impact of these times on young people. All of this pressure from COVID-19, number one, from having to social distance, from not being in school, the pressure from having watched the George Floyd murder, now the incident around the young brother in Brooklyn Center, his death, the trial, all of that is a lot to put on our children. And Lily is one of our children who decided that she would not be flattened by this oppressive weight of the time, but that she would react and organize and lead. Lily, good to see you. Take a minute, if you would, and talk about yourself and talk about what you've done as a student organizer in your community. Then want to bring the elders in to put all this in context.
Okay, thank you. Hi. I'm flattered to be here with all of these wonderful people. I am a 10th grader at my high school, and for what I did was I was not really feeling the whole, like Maya said, the pressure of everything that happened, including the Dante Wright killing. He died in Brooklyn Center on April 11th, where I used to live. And so I really had I felt a connection, not only just to him, but to how unjust his death was. And so I did something about it at my school. I planned and organized a walkout, starting with the Minnesota Teen Activist Instagram page. They made a whole organized for all Minnesota schools to walk out, and I communicated with them personally and told them that I was going to participate in their protest as well. And so I organized my whole school. I led the walkout. There's photos and pictures of us communicating. I had speakers, including Black teachers, Black educators, and parents from not even only our school, but from our district, talked talk at the protest as well. And it was peaceful. I talked to my principal, Carol Campa, about it and told her that there are students that are feeling unjust. There are people that can't even speak about this at home, and POC people and white people as well. It's a very touchy topic for most people. And I felt like speaking about it and bringing it up, lifting it as a bigger thing and making sure that everyone knows about it and that everyone is feeling okay to have a voice and have a say about what happened is why I made the walkout in the first place. So yes, I did that. Also, before that, for the George Floyd killing as well, I made a protest as for that as well. I went to my local Cup Foods and protest on the street is there. They kicked us out into the side, so we stood in the front of their parking lot and protested that as well. We didn't stop, so I felt like that was a big part in a major feeling of how I wasn't going to settle down or settle with what has happened, but push forward and make it known that I am I'm here with everyone else as well, even if I am a younger individual. So yeah.
I'm so impressed. Let me ask Dr. Billy Russell and Dr. Richard Coleman to weigh in the spirit of what these young leaders have said. Maya, with her phenomenal art and voice, and Lily, with her phenomenal voice and courage as a teenager. Dr. Russell, Dr. Coleman, how do we talk about protest in our community, not only here in Twin Cities, but protest in the world, and our responsibility to bring our bodies and our mind to the line in the cause of justice? Dr. Billy, what do you think?
Yeah, hearing her say that she organized protests as a 10th grader, it brings back to my memory as an 11th grader. I think I organized the first protest at our school, bringing all the people together because there was just so much unjust things going on. And when we did a walkout at our school, and it made a huge difference. It was trying to take a celebration of Martin Luther King Black History Month away from us. But because of our protest, not only did they give us a day, but they gave us a month. But it was a peaceful protest. Now, I've been involved in protests through the civil rights age. I've seen it all. In the 60s, in the 70s, even in the 80s. But even when I became a principal in Marion County Schools, we had a hanging. A young man was hung in Marion County. And again, we had to protest because, listen, we know it was white supremacist group that ended up hanging him. Matter of fact, we had visited their site and seen what they were doing. And we protested but I want you to I can say that I'm gonna agree with protests. I've been involved in protests. I thank you for your involvement in protests, especially as young people. We need you as young people to be involved. And if you don't do it, listen, it's not going to be done. We need the young people because some of these older people, it's too late. Some of these older white folks, it's too late. We got to look at trying to educate our young people to make a difference in this world today. So we thank you, young people, for doing that. And I'm in line with what Babbington is saying in the letter. Look, we all agree on this because we believe that protest is a must, but it must be peaceful protest. And we can make a difference. I'm a living witness that we can do that. And I will not allow white supremacists to come in and take over what we're doing. I'm a victim. Even here, there was some, during the protest after the George Floyd killing, there were people who tried to burn down my church. And the neighborhood stopped 2 young white boys with gas cans. They was identified as white supremacist group that was trying to burn down the church. Why?
Talk about that. What happened? Tell me the story about that. I wasn't aware of that. It's horrific to hear it, but talk about it.
I was called on a Sunday evening. Really, the FBI called me and said there were credible threats. And so by the time I got to the church, already the neighborhood had caught them, had stopped them. And that's why last year on Juneteenth, we had a celebration for the neighborhood. I actually had Reverend Bruce Carpenter come out with his food truck and feed the whole doggone neighborhood, because if it had not been for them, And it was in our neighborhood where the church is mostly white people, but they stopped those kids from burning down the church. And I mean, I don't know why they wanted to burn it down, but it was just all the activity that was going on at the George Floyd site. You know, we're about 10 blocks away from there. So all the activity was going up and down 38th Street, up and down 30th Street, all these unmarked cars. And they was all up and down the street, and it was burning down the service station right down from us. And we would build a new school. We was afraid what would happen to the school. We had to board the school and all this stuff. And here it is. They actually was going to burn down the church, but the neighborhood stopped them.
As you're talking, Pastor Russell, the thought comes to mind, and it's a gruesome thought, that bombing a Black church is not anything that's new. We've been here before.
We've been here before, and that's exactly what I thought about when he did that. Like, why you want to do it? I don't know what he thought somebody was going to be in the church or not be in the church, but the fact that they wanted to burn it down or to blow it up, that was the thing.
Reverend Coleman, what do you think? What's on your mind, your heart right now? Unmute your microphone. Unmute.
Thank you, Al and Babington and Dr. Russell and Lily and Maya. We're just so grateful for your testimony, for your story, Maya and Lily. We just, as people of faith, when we hear your story, it's not difficult to think about the Spirit of Christ. We see Christ in you. There are a lot of people today in despair, disillusioned, hopeless, thinking that there's nothing to do but fight physically. But you're demonstrating, and Maya, you said you couldn't sleep, and the issue connected with you spiritually, and then you use your spiritual weapon of war, one of them, which is music and writing, and you compose something. And Lily, you were disturbed and troubled by what was going on, and as a 10th grader, had the wisdom and foresight to tap into your heart and into your soul and allow the Spirit of God to give you that strength to step out and to be extraordinary. And you are extraordinary leaders, and we thank God. Often we say as elders that you're the future leaders. That is absolutely untrue. There's a story in the Bible that you're familiar with, that Jesus of Nazareth was with his mom and dad on a trip, and they looked around and saw he was not connecting with them. He had decided to go back and was there with the elders and was mixing with them and building relationships and learning. And it's so exciting to see what happened after that. And then when they found him, he said, I got to be about my Father's business. And that's what you are about. And I just pray for you that the fire that's in you will spread all across our community, and others will see that you can protest in all kinds of creative ways. You can be, when the Spirit of God is guiding you and you're responding in faith, miracles happen, mountains come down, walls are torn down, and ways are made out of no way. So I am so excited and blessed just to hear your stories today. And I pray that God will continue to bless you and that you will have an open heart to what God is calling you to do.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, a special extended version of the program today. Thanks to Lady J for giving us her time for her normal 2-hour stint. We're here with our town hall, and we're talking about embracing protest, responsibility, accountability, the elements of that, the history of it in our community. And my co-pilot for this, co-sponsor, is Alfred Babington Johnson, the leader at His Works United, the convener, and leader at the Stair Step Foundation. Brother Babington, continue if you would. Unmute. Here we go. Thank you.
I think earlier today when we were talking, I think you asked me something about a headline or what's a tag, and I think I don't want to think of the tag as protest. I think I would like to think of the tag as winning. There there's a point to this. If we don't win, what is the point? You know? And so part of that notion is recognizing the obstacles to winning. You know, some that are from outside, some that are from inside, you know, but all of them have to be taken on. You know, we have to take them all on. And I want to segue something, but I want to come to something, and just to put a pin here to say where I want to come to at some point, I want to say Maya. Okay. But before that, though, the issue that there are a lot of things for us to deal with. We are protesting, for instance, about excessive force by the police. And this is critically important. We protest around disparities of various kinds, lack of access. This voter suppression thing is about to drive me crazy. How it can even be, how people can operate in that way. But the same kind of lack of humanity that Derek Chauvin showed is on display in all these areas, as we see the society itself lending itself to voter suppression, if you will, or exclusion or privilege parades, if you will. So we have to be against all those things. But I think the winning part is about us getting beyond simply being reactionary. We've got to start pursuing a vision and not simply being in a react space to what did they do to me last? What are they going to do to me next? You know, we have to be proactive. And so Maya, so Brianna, 26 shots. But hey, pretty, your hue becomes you. These are 2 books that she's done. Hey, pretty, speaking to the idea of esteem in Black women, men, whomever, because we're living in a space in which we're getting all this negative messaging, you know? Mm-hmm. And so she was prompted to produce Hey Pretty, both book and song. And then your hue becomes you.
Your hue looks good on you.
Your hue looks good on you.
Yeah.
Much better type. But the point is, that's where we've got to escape to that proactive space where we're doing things that build, that we are intentionally about capacity for our community. We're intentionally about aspiration and moving forward, and not simply being in the react stop space. You know, I think that's something we have to come to, Al. I think, and that's one of the things I was very impressed with Attorney General Ellison on 60 Minutes, when he was asked, and I think people wanted him to end up saying some a lot of things with a lot of vitriol about Derek Chauvin. And he ended up saying something that indicated he recognized Derek Chauvin was another human being.
Right.
I thought, okay, now. I mean, was he wrong? Absolutely. Should he pay the price? Absolutely. But if we get trapped into that kind of way, of that construct in terms of how we are, how we feel, how we look, how we do, we're lost. We got to get to that space where we recognize that we are in a human space with other human beings, all of us struggling to get to a better place.
Absolutely. You know, I wanted to share, if I can do a screen share here. You mentioned the title for the article. I'm looking at it on my screen. It's the subtitle was Embracing Protest, but the title was Strategic Planning, Coalition Building, and the Practice of Discipline. So I wanted to address those things because I think those ideas summarized the flow of the text that you and the colleagues of the His Works United Policy Board presented in Insight News this week. Strategic planning, coalition building, and the practice of discipline. So speak to those, if you would, Brother Babington.
Okay, great. I get to talk?
Yes. Yes.
I'm still unused to it. Oh, okay. But you know what, Al? I think that's really to my point again. We've got to get to that place where we're mapping out our victory. Mm-hmm. You know, and then it means recognizing the challenge, we got to seriously look at the challenges inside, outside, and engage to win in these spaces. One of the critical issues we have is us killing ourselves. That's in some ways, a more critical issue than the police. If we look at the numbers, how we shoot each other. Last week, Dante Wright's funeral on, I think it was Thursday. On Saturday, a young man in St. Paul who was a 15-year-old had been gunned down. It's too much. And so, and I would like to maybe hear a little bit from Maya about that. What's your sense, Maya, about this issue of our young people killing each other and the intergenerational connect? What are your thoughts?
So the thing is, I've been on both sides kind of the fence. Like I've seen, obviously we see every day someone else getting killed by the police. But I've had several friends who were actually victims of gun violence, but it wasn't from the police. It was from people that I know, people that we knew, people that we grew up around. I believe that there's such a disregard and a distaste in our community's mouth for law enforcement that it causes a ripple effect. And one of those effects is that we kind of take situations into our own hands, regardless, whether that be just an argument you've had or something that goes on that you need help for, but we don't really view law enforcement as help. And I think that because of that has trickled down to the mindsets of especially young men in our community, whereas they're the protectors of their own selves and of their families. And if they have an issue or if anybody has an issue with them, they're going to be the ones that handle it. And I feel like, the whole reason gangs were even started was they were originally for protection, a sense of community. And I believe that just the thought of law enforcement, even what Micaiah Bryant, she was calling the police for help, right? And she ends up getting killed. So it's not even, I think that's why those two things are just tied in. They run together. Just for me, I feel like we do get a lot of young people in general get a lot of flack for that. When somebody wants to protest a police killing or even speak up about it, it's like, well, first of all, y'all got to stop killing yourself first. And, and even elders say this to young people in the community. Stop worry about stop killing people that look like you, or stop that, and it would stop if they had proper, instruction or direction or somebody to help lead in a different direction instead of just telling them, oh, well, don't worry about the police killing you. You're killing yourselves. I feel like it's kind of like, the saying, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't teach it how to drink. Or, it's just like, why would we give these how can I say this? Why, we're sending these messages. Why are we giving them these messages that killing each other is wrong, but there's no solution? Well, how does it stop? How do we start something else? And it does start with a better policing, maybe that's not the word, but better relationships or connections with people that are supposed to protect you. I think we have protection is misconstrued. Just knowing that these young people, the young people behind the violence, the young people behind the guns, that they're actually people, just like Derek Chauvin was a human. These young guys that are killing each other, like I grew up with some guys that have committed actually heinous acts, violent acts toward people that look like them, but I knew them before that was their story. And it's like it could have been stopped. It could have been mitigated if they had an opportunity. If something else was presented to them. And I feel like that just goes back to the principle. I'm really big on the principle of Sankofa. You can't go any further in your future without looking back and reaching to your past. And I feel like that generational gap and that divide is because, first of all, people don't even know what Sankofa is, let alone embrace it. But it's like we can't move forward. That's why there's so many different agendas, because we have to look back, and young people, we don't want to get shunned. And I'm pretty sure our elders, they don't want to have to deal with all the attitude that comes with it. But at some point, we have to get together and communicate. So I think a big thing with that is communication. I don't know. I probably digressed a lot, but that was loaded.
No, it's just fine. That's perfect. It's good to hear that. And so I'm going to pass it over to Pastor Billy Russell again. Think about what she is saying, and if you would put in context, it's like doing two things at one time, internal and external. We have to be mindful and press on as a community towards freedom and justice. But we have adversary experiences, activities within the community. And I'd say if it's in the community, it's within our very selves. So how do we figure out, what do we do to enable support, enable us to organize and resist the internal challenges and failures, while we consistently and continue to address the society, the movement of our people towards our dignity. At the end of the day, they're one and the same. What do you think, Pastor Russell?
Well, I hope I'm understanding your question right, but I think that those of us who have been through things and we understand what has happened in the past, we got to make sure that our people today understand the past, as was said, the Sankofa. We got to know what happened in the past in order to understand where we're going today. So I think it's very important that the elders in our society, we got to lead the way. We still got to show the way. We may not be able to get out in the street and protest and march or whatever, but I do think we have to give guidance. We have to show support in order to make sure that we continue to make a difference in the world today. So the bottom line is the elders need to take a lead. And that's the reason why when I say retiring from pastoring, I'm not retiring from leadership role. I'm retiring so I can be on a more international role, a national and international role, to try to guide people in the right direction, because there's a need right now for national, international leadership, and to show people this is where we come from. This is how we got to where we are today. And this is how we're going to get to where we need to go to in the future. So right now, we need to make sure that we are at the table with each other, conversating. It's going to be important that young people talk with older people and accept their guidance. It's going to be important for us to give that guidance.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We're doing a town hall focusing on the question of the protest movement broadly, but really more on the question of how do we use strategic planning, coalition building, and the practice of discipline in the arena of protest and beyond that as tools to help us build community, to build ourselves individually, I think, our families, our neighborhoods, but also at the end of the day, building community. My co-host for this is Alfred Babington Johnson, the leader of the Stair Step Initiatives, Stair Step Foundation, and the convener of His Works United, a marvelous collection of pastoral leaders in Minnesota's Black community. And we have as guests, you just heard Pastor Billy Russell, also Reverend Richard Coleman is here, and Maya. I know you as Maya Buckner. Your stage name, your stage presence is Maya Marshall. Thank you. And then we had Lily Rankin. I think she's gone now, but Lily as a 10th grader as part of the program. Reverend Coleman, your take on the discussion. How do we both deal with the internal, the need for individual commitment, resolve, staying focused? How do we prevent ourselves and our failings from disappointing ourselves, our families, our community, our neighbors, and at the same time be mindful of this larger work that our life is a part of, that is the life of the village itself?
Thank you, Al. And again, back to Maya's point and Babington's earlier comment as we frame the importance, talk about the importance of strategic planning, that we have to plan to win. We have to know that we win. That speaks to vision. So there is a vision, and that vision has to be embraced by the whole community. And that's so part of the internal, external assessments we do in planning is to look at our assets, look at our threats, look at those things that are working for us and against us. And one of the things that we have for us that we have in the last few generations have not done a great job with is the interrelationship of the younger and the older leaders, so that there can be greater clarity around vision and because the coalition building is an important tactic, an important way of getting at winning. It does not exist alone. And so what does a coalition look like that springs from a prior conversation amongst younger and older Black folk in particular in this case? And that's what we want to have happen. So I want to encourage, Maya to know that there are older leaders who understand. And thank you, Babington, for helping to ensure that Maya could come today as a prophet, speaking truth concerning the younger people's role and perspective. And Lily, who's not, with us right now, but a part of the strategic plan has to be that the table consists of younger people, and their voices and thoughts will then help to develop and articulate a vision and a mission and what does winning look like? What is the goal? What is it we're really after together? So that's my a take on what I've heard so far and what we're talking about.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So what does winning look like? I feel sometimes, Dr. Coleman, as if I've got this one note samba,
Yeah.
And, I can't get off it. I think winning looks like community. I think winning looks like connectedness. I think winning looks like recognition of each other's humanity. That's winning. I think that's what God wants of us, So then the question is, if we could really zero in on the goal, then we try to make sure that as many of the things, hopefully all the things we do, are moving in the direction of the goal. That's why, the principles of the stair-step 7 principles or philosophical notions around building community. One of them is about esteem, building esteem, because people who feel good about themselves do better with other people. You know what I mean? What are the values of the community that we are dedicated to, that have historically served us in order to go forward? The issue of reinforcing our institutions is critical, because that's how you get broader change. It's one thing to have one and one and one, but it's another if you have some intentional strategies that help to reach more broadly, So critical to this whole thing, though, is the idea of communication in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way, this letter that we put forward is an opportunity, or at least an invitation around communication. It's not about a mandate and here's the instruction from Mount Olympus, but it really is about, hey, listen, as we are looking at this situation, this occurs to us as a challenge. The fact that the good that is being achieved, and there is good being achieved, is being distorted because other folk are entering in and they're exploiting it for their own purposes, and their own purposes are not our purposes. The white supremacist agenda is not my agenda. The anarchists, I don't want anarchy. I'm not a fan of anarchy personally. And I really don't want the spirit of opportunism, which often happens with the looting and whatever, to be dominant in the land, because that doesn't serve us long term. So if those are some challenges, here's some suggestions. It's about a communication. And one of the questions, Al, thank God for Conversations with Al McFarlane. That's what you do every day. You're having conversations, you're putting it out there. And I think that we need to recognize the value of that more and join into that spirit more, whether it's in this vehicle or other vehicles. How do we have more communication intergenerationally? that are respectful. Because right now it's as if it was interesting to hear Maya talk about this conversation about we're killing each other versus the killing of the police, and the lens to which she saw that, and the ears through which she was hearing that, which are different from my sense of that conversation. You know what I mean? And it's good to sit and talk and try to find out how does real communication, what is being said and what's being received, and where's the truth or where's the connect point. We need to create more exercises in that regard. It seems to me, Al, and so maybe I want to ask you, because we talked about the creation of things, and you talked about even the Breonna 26 shots came out of a moment in which you were, betwixt and between a lot of things. As we are talking about this general conversation, and what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that, one, we have this moment in time. We got the COVID thing that has forced us into a space. We got the recognition of inhumanity that came out of the George Floyd thing. We have the fact that at the same time on January 6th, we had a bunch of folk who stormed the Capitol, and just to get their results, whatever happened. And we have this moment now where we're being we're protesting, we're being taken advantage of, and we say, well, how can we have a dialogue? As you look at this whole piece, Maya, where is the thing that strikes you most? What are the 1, 2, maybe 3 things that strike you in this moment most in terms of where you might want to point some artistic energy?
That's just difficult. Just being an artist or being a creative. There's like sometimes where you're like super inspired. There's sometimes when you just have like pockets of inspiration, and then there are other times where you have nothing at all. It's just your thoughts. And I think I'm in the middle of that. It's just like, okay, yeah, I did Breonna Taylor. That was like I was super. I was really provoked. Like it was like Reverend Coleman said, my spirit really kind of initiated that. The other day, I was thinking like I couldn't get out of my head. I really couldn't. I still can't get Ma'Khia Bryant out of my head. I don't know what that means for that. I feel like if I sit with it some more, or if I like heard music or heard something that prompted me to write, I don't know yet. So I do believe that there's something artistic and creative will come out of this. I just haven't been able to pinpoint those things yet. Just the fact that it was just like the day that we got the verdict for Derek Chauvin, she happens to get killed. Like that was just really ironic to me, and I'm still actually processing that. Like it's still happening. It's kind of like just in our face. Like yeah. Y'all got one. You might win some, but you just lost one, basically.
Yeah.
So that I'm still toying with that. However, I know that I'm not the only creative person I know, and I know there's several artists that I'm sure they may have something else that could help push me creatively, or I could vice versa. So yeah, I'm stuck there right now.
So, let me ask you this, if you don't mind, Al. There's nothing more historic than the intergenerational divide.
Help us, Lord.
That happens forever, right? One day you're going to be on the other side of it, Maya.
See that?
That's how that goes. But I'm wondering if this is a unique time, though. I mean, it's always been there. It's always young pushing the old out of the way so we can have our moment, and the old saying, "Wait, not yet." Short, whatever. We got all that. But I'm wondering, is this different? So what kind of things exist in this time and space? We got the 24-hour news cycle, for instance. That's making a difference, We got 250 channels that are looking for content,
Social media.
Huh?
Social media.
Social media.
Yeah.
This swirl, does that make a difference in terms of the intergenerational dialogue?
I think it's easier. It makes it easier. I do feel like this time is very unique, and it's different from any other time that we've seen historically, because I feel like you said, there's like it's like a window, like a small window, but I feel like for some reason the door is still open. It hasn't shut all the way yet, and I feel like it's remaining open for a reason. And I feel like we're
the door for communication.
Yeah. Yep. I feel like it's open and it's that way for a reason. And I feel like what you're doing right now with Reverend Coleman, Reverend Russell, Mr. McFarlane, all of this is it's like it's the first steps, like of not only keeping the door cracked, but just open it, having a revolving door, maybe even. I do feel like this time is very unique because there has not been history made that we can see in real time. Like this social media is like a very, very powerful tool. And I feel like that will help with the divide, kind of. Young people, they're glued to TikTok. So you can put anything on TikTok and a kid will believe it.
Let me take a break. My conversation ID at top of the hour. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm going to do a brief station ID and come back and wrap up this conversation. You're listening to Conversations with Al McFarlane, our town hall, with the His Works United and Stair Step Foundation, talking about the question of protest in our community. We'll be right back.
Are you a writer, a reader, a curious person? Are you looking to get more involved in the Minnesota literary community, to hear live interviews with local and national authors, and to hear great book recommendations and behind-the-scenes facts about book publishing? Listen to Right On Radio from 7 to 8 p.m. every Tuesday here on KFAI 90.3 FM and live on the web at kfai.org.
Programming on KFAI is supported by Family Tree Clinic, a family planning, reproductive, sexual health, and education clinic. Now offering a confidential family planning and STI hotline for questions regarding sexual health. Open to all. More information at sexualhealthmn.org.
Programming on KFAI is supported by North Hennepin Community College. North Hennepin Community College presents Stages of Equity, a 3-day virtual arts festival from April 30th to May 2nd, featuring artists of color-led projects that address racial equity, racial awareness, and inclusivity. Watch, listen, and engage with local and national hip-hop artists, dancers, authors, street artists, spoken word improvisers, and more. Visit nhccfinearts.org for the whole lineup and to learn more.
2 minutes after 3 o'clock here on KFAI, Fresh Air Community Radio, 90.3 FM HD, Minneapolis, on the web at kfai.org. We are in the middle of the third hour of Conversations with Al McFarlane, an extended show today, live with Al McFarlane. Take it away, Mr. Al.
Thank you, Mason, and thanks to Lady J for giving us the opportunity to go deep, to go far with today's program. It's been a wonderful program, a great program. I want to just reflect back on what we've done over the past couple of hours. We opened up introducing our co-host and sponsor today, His Works United, and the Stair Step Foundation, setting the stage for an interview that was with the amazing Attorney General, an amazing interview with Keith Ellison, reflecting on his department's success in the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. And that led to the discussion we're having now. That discussion included the voice and analysis of Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, who is the president and CEO of the Black Press of America. Our organization is called National Newspaper Publishers Association. And as a matter of fact, that part of the program and this part are being streamed nationwide live at Black Press USA NNPA, Black Press USA NNPA. And what will happen from this point on is that our regular Conversations with Al McFarlane programs every day will be streamed nationwide on Black Press USA NNPA. Of course, we're also streaming to our local platforms here, part of the McFarlane Media Dashboard. That includes our Facebook page. You may be with us on Facebook. It includes our YouTube channel. If you're there, like, subscribe, share. And again, most of all, thanks to the team that I have at McFarlane Media, Kelvin Curia. You hear me talking to Kelvin all the time. He's in the background, pulling the levers, making it happen. Thanks to AZ Kirsten, who's one of the organizers and young techies that helps bring this together. Obviously, thanks to Batala McFarlane, who's the publisher of Inside News, for bringing all of us together and keeping us focused on creating content for our community, and Carmen Robles, who was one of the content production managers for this program, Conversations with Al McFarlane. There are others that I have failed to mention, but all of them do great work. We are grateful to have them as part of our team, to be on their team, and to be as a team in service to community. You, the listeners here on KFAI, you who are watching on social media, and to those who are in the program with me here from the Stair Step Foundation. So Babington, we're going to try to wrap it up in about 10 minutes here. This has been a wonderful program, and especially inspiring to hear from both Maya and Lily, young visionaries. I call them fierce young leaders, and when I hear them, I have this confidence that our future is great, and that, as I said early on, victory is at hand and victory is inevitable. Does that mean we don't have to work? No, it means we've got to work harder and keep working. Babington, what do you think?
I think Maya's got to go.
We're at the end, and that's great. Go ahead, Maya. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Final word, Maya. Final thought.
You know, I'm excited. You all, you say that I give you hope, but you give me the same hope that we will be able to connect and to keep this door open, to close this divide. You know, we always talk about the achievement gap, and, you know, financial gap, all these things, all these gaps, but we don't really talk about the intergenerational gap. So I feel like we are making great strides to keep this thing going.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so
Right.
much.
I'll
Okay.
talk to you all later.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Babington, how you and Reverend Coleman can wrap up the program.
Okay. Well, let me defer to my older brother, Reverend. No, I'm not sure. I won't assert that. I'll just leave that out there for the public to decide.
No, you have to tell the truth, brother. So go ahead with your comments.
We have it by a year or two. I'm not sure. But I do appreciate my brother Richard. We've been colleagues a long time, almost as long as, well, maybe you and I have been colleagues longer, Al. I guess that's why we share the same haircut. But but I thank God for this moment in time, and I thank God for Reverend Coleman, because he and Billy Russell really reached into resource opportunity to make it possible for us to have this town forum, to actually take the ad and to move this conversation forward. And it is, Al, as you said, about trying to seed into our community the idea of being more strategic, of really starting to analyze our issues, and then taking steps that are designed to get to the outcome we intend, as opposed to just kind of pinball-like going from pillar to post, or being a kind of victim of the wind. But we can decide where we want to go. And if we want to go towards community, which I believe is God's intention for us, what are the things we must do every day? Every day. How am I moving forward to that agenda? And I think this opportunity we had, Al, as we look at the situation that's going on with critical protests, which some are trying to steal from us. You know, if they can distort our protests to the point they become ineffective or frustrating alone, then we have lost. But if we look at the situation and say, no, our protest is a valuable tool, and we will not have it sullied or detoured by others, what must we do? And we decide how to go. Well, that's a template for each issue. Let's analyze it. Let's move forward intentionally, Dr. Coleman.
And we have an obligation as elders to do that. I believe that's one of the things we owe our community, and we owe our younger ones. And we've had mothers and fathers who've done that for us. We've today talked back to those who helped. In fact, the very letter that you helped to draft that was co-signed by the heads of our Black denominations builds on the traditions of our elders. Mm-hmm. And so, and I really appreciate the fact that under your leadership, we stepped into I think a pivotal moment where we have articulated a vision of what protest looks like. And I love the notion that now it's about winning. Let's define what that is. And I love that the answer is that it's community, where we know each other, we love each other, we support each other. And the roof is off in terms of possibilities. Finally, I will just say that the big elephant in the room is white supremacy. If you know, in the American room today, it exists. And I call upon our white friends and allies to never allow that truth to become ignored or shoved into a corner or glossed over or unattended. Black folk cannot undo white supremacy. Mm. And our young folk know that. And the question that they have is, are we as Black folk going to be able to coalesce around truth and around the goodness of our community and of our village to the extent that we can grow and we can thrive? With that, can allies walk with us to achieve that? And I would say that allies that are unwilling to acknowledge the evil and the sin of white supremacy and destruct that and walk alongside us puts us in a place where, as a Black community, we as elders today, Al and Babington and others, I believe we have to determine that regardless of who goes with us, if God be for us, amen, we're going to win.
Amen. Say, Al, the thing, I mean, that's such a powerful note of optimism, Dr. Coleman. Thank you. I'm wondering, though, Al, to one thing that Dr. Chavis mentioned about the letter and what he thought of its validity, potential impact, because the conversation is not just about Minneapolis. In some ways, maybe for a while, it might not be a critical issue for us tomorrow, the day after, till the next inflammatory thing happens. But all over the country, our communities are experiencing the same thing, and the issue of not allowing protest as a viable tool to be perverted by anybody. It might be white supremacists in one instance, it might just be opportunists in another, but whatever it is, the protest is about trying to make a point and have an impact and get a good outcome. It's not about destroying our communities. It's not about allowing others to destroy our communities under the cloak, whatever. So I'm just wondering, with his notion about it ought to be more broadly shared, maybe that's something for you, Al, and the NNPA to think about in some way.
Well, I think what he committed was that we would share it. So we'll be generating this story as we're speaking. This conversation is being shared across America through the Facebook page of the Black Press USA NNPA. So our national network is plugged in to this conversation. And obviously, I will send the advertisement that we did, the letter, the open letter, and the article, both to our national website for distribution to our member newspapers around the country. But I wanted to let our listeners know that what's planned for after we wrap this conversation up is a revisit to one of the shows I did recently with a panel of esteemed legal experts, lawyers, who met with me on a couple of occasions just to do kind of a review and recap of the Derek Chauvin trial. And we're going to do that in a few minutes to close the show. We won't listen to the entire program, but parts of it, because it was fascinating dialogue. And what was fascinating about it was that it was brothers, in this case, 4 Black men, 3 of whom were lawyers, and me as a moderator, talking about the Derek Chauvin trial. but the most important thing is that we were talking together.
Mhm.
I value this moment, Reverend Coleman and Brother Babington, in exactly the same way. And what is critical is that we have conversations like this.
Amen.
Reverend Coleman, I think you brought the whole point of our being together today into perfect clarity. And the question, the point you raised, is what is our obligation to deal with, to withstand, to not be eliminated by white supremacy, by white supremacist thought. And what that requires, I believe, and you've demonstrated that, is a boldness and a willingness to say what it is, and then to talk about it, and to talk about it in a way that we believe the listeners on this station, primarily white listeners who are KFAI members and listeners, but allies and progressives, right? And so we need to discuss what allyship is, what progressivism is, and where our interests both come into confluence, they're parallel, but also where there is conflict. And if there is a conflict at some point in time, what do we need to do? And I think, Babington, you were addressing this whole notion of steadfastness to our vision and our mission, and not being distracted or disturbed. So I want to take a few extra minutes, if you both are familiar or are comfortable with it, to unpack that some more. And how do we, Reverend Coleman, boldly stand against the strategies and the tools and the aims of white supremacists, which we know to be aims that deny our humanity? What do you think?
We can identify the Abrahamic faiths as a starting place, because we all hold, I think, in our hearts the truth that God is about justice and righteousness, period. And anything that is unjust and unrighteousness is antithetical to our faith as Christians, as Jews, as Muslims, and is inconsistent with other faiths as well. Buddhist faith believes, of course, in our oneness, and most religions do. So we starting at that point gives us the opportunity to name, in the context of faith, which I think is vital and central and critical, because there's a level playing field here. We can name white supremacy as evil, and that requires us to respond to it in faith, and that gives me hope. I'm not ignorant. I understand that there is great opposition to that, but I'm also mindful that we're aligned with God's will when we stand for justice and righteousness. And no matter who's against us, they're dealing with more than us. They're dealing with the issue that God calls us all to, in this context in America today, to respond to. And I really believe that the church in America is being judged right now. I believe that. This is an epochal moment. I believe in eternity. There are some others. When history is written, and if we were able to look back, we would see this time in America, when the enemy raised his head and shouted indignities and insults, castigating people and abusing people because of their ethnicity, even from the highest office in our land. That God holds us in judgment, and it begins, I believe, in the church, in the faith community. And so I believe that is a harsh truth, but it needs to be told. It has to be told, because as an elder, I feel an obligation to that, to be very clear about that in a loving way. We don't say it out of hate. We don't say it out of spite. There's no sense of retribution or retaliation or judgment. It's the reality that has to be agreed to. Those who will repent can be allied on the journey that is before us. Those who do not are then identified, and they will deal with God on God's terms. But as for us, we have to be about our Father's business.
Babington, jump in there.
Well, I would jump in to say amen first. But the other thing I would say is I really feel as if we need to be more and more intentional about being active as opposed to reactive. You know, I think reactive is a trap. You know, so if we're ever in the space of trying to undo what has been done to us by others, which we could spend a lifetime doing, or I think there's a reorientation in which we press forward to that which we have ahead of us. Eyes on the prize. You know, more than one time, Reverend Dr. Richard Coleman, more than once, has preached from a text that relates to the fact that Paul says, forgetting those things which are behind, I press towards the prize, for the prize of the upward calling of God in Christ Jesus. And I think that we have to reorient ourselves for the upward call, and forget those things which are behind. Now, I don't think Paul meant by that you are a foolish person and you don't acknowledge the fact that if there is a hole in front of me, I need to step around it. But I think his point was my orientation is the going forward orientation. What's my aspiration? And as a community, we must aspire to community. We must aspire to godliness. We must aspire to brotherhood in these matters, and leave the vitriol and the hatred and the detritus behind us as we press forward. I really think we got to struggle, Al, to get that orientation of going forward and not being trapped by those things which others want to heap upon us.
I would agree with that, Babington, completely. And I think it's part of the strategic conversation we have to have spiritually about how we do this. And so I think my comments and remarks are important for me to take to heart as I imagine and think about what it is I say and do as a leader and how I go about it, you know. And so I've determined that the work of undoing white supremacy and her children, racism and all the rest of that is the work of white people, essentially. But as for us, our eye has to be laser beamed on what we have to accomplish. And I think we failed in some way of being clear around that. And so the call, Al, that you make in Babington to strategic thought and planning is critical. Because that's that right there. That issue in itself is an example of the importance of assessment and clarity, and then moving forward. And so the opportunity for allies will be to pick up the burden, if you will.
Amen.
And so I'm going to ask you, Reverend Coleman, to say what the vision is. You're talking about strategic planning and communicating that internally so that whether or not allies are with us or not, we still are not deterred, not detracted, and we press forward. What is that? What is that goal? How do you describe that? I believe that what it is in and of itself is a harmonizing force that reveals the truth of our existence as human beings, and that as it continues to express itself, by definition, it invites allies to join and to be harmonized as well. And it's an attractive, magnetic, powerful, and transforming proposition and force. What do you think? How do you describe it?
I think you've done a beautiful job. And Babington said earlier, it's community. It's our village. And for there to be community, there has to be the coming together. There has to be a reckoning to truth, and for us to come together in thought and in spirit. And I'm not talking about religion. We have to rise to the point of God kingdom consciousness, that to understand that it's not about what we say as much as it is about what God says. And God says we're to be together.
Amen.
That's what glorifies the work of God in the earth, is that. So the vision is a people coming together. And I believe that journey of becoming, for me, is compelling. That, you know, if we can articulate more clearly what that looks like, you know, we quickly move into the dimension of planning of the dimension of strategic planning that requires programming. And, you know, often we move into that so quickly, we have not done an adequate job in the visioning part and the missional part. And I think that maybe that's where we've fallen short, Al. So a part of the journey short term, I think, is the calling to oneness and the embracing of one another and the esteem, the values of stair step, to actually put that into practice. And wouldn't it be awesome if we just adopted some of the brilliant thinking that has been given to us, that's been embraced by stair step, that becomes a model that we can look at and move forward, because that then will result in the development of the human being.
Turn your sign
And out of the development of human being comes the development of resources through trade, through creativity and art and thought and religion.
Okay.
We're in your conversation, Babington. Sorry.
Yeah. I'll get yours, but I just got a call, and I don't think it's from heaven, because it's on my iPhone. But it's our coordinator of our vaccine and our navigators, and so she says there's an announcement that should be made, and I'm going to ask her to speak up and make the announcement. Go ahead, Tamika. Tamika?
You may have to just tell us, because and was it about a vaccine opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah, let's close on that. Let's make it and close on that.
Babington. I just wanted to share with everyone that's present for this wonderful discussion today. We do have some available COVID-19 vaccines for our clinic tomorrow at the Minneapolis Urban League. Right there, North Minneapolis, from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. We have Moderna vaccines, and we'll have a small amount of Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And I did put information in the comments for anyone that wants to reach out.
Perfect.
Okay, so tomorrow at the Urban League from 1 to 7, we have some openings. But Tamika, what is the number of the hotline?
Our hotline number is 612-254-1228.
Would you repeat?
254-1228. And I also included an email address in the comments.
612-254-1228. 1228. Okay.
God bless you all. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
It's been wonderful indeed. So if you're listening anywhere in Twin Cities, that's an opportunity you don't want to pass up. We want to encourage you to step up and get the vaccination. And there's an opportunity in the community tomorrow at the Urban League on Plymouth and Penn in North Minneapolis, one that's organized by the Stair Step Foundation and His Works United, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But please call the number that was given, so that, to make sure that there's availability, because we may get inundated.
Okay. Listen, gentlemen, we're out of time. This has been a great conversation, a necessary conversation. I think we've moved into an area that we don't talk about enough publicly, but we need to talk more about publicly. In a way, we're defining pathways to a future that is sustaining and it is beautiful, but that takes work. And what we're saying is that we're willing to do the work. We've been doing the work, and we're willing to keep on doing the work. And we encourage people to do so. Final words, yours, Brother Babington.
I just want to thank you, Al. You are a visionary in our community, and the work that you're doing in providing these conversations on any number of critical issues is invaluable. We do pray God's blessing on you, that he will make you the more prosperous and allow your message to find its way into the highest places in the land.
Yes, Lord.
Listen, with that, I want to thank you both. And Calvin's going to play some music now, just a little bit for transition. And we're going to finish the show up, the last half an hour, with a part of, I think, a powerful and interesting analysis of what was going on in the Derek Chauvin trial. The analysis was provided by three legal experts, Professor retired Dean Burnell Venable Powell, who was the dean of the law school at the University of South Carolina, Kamal King, a lawyer who is retired corporate counsel for Coca-Cola Company based in Atlanta, Georgia, and our own Clinton Collins, who is a corporate counsel for Geico, but like me, served as a director of the Minneapolis Urban League and followed me as chairman of the board of the Urban League. We had a rich conversation. That's what we do. So music, and then to the amount that we can get in of the program with the discussion on the Derek Chauvin trial with the lawyers. And after that, we'll turn it over to the station again for today's programming. Thank you all for being with us. I've enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the balance as well.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Val.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Babby.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with your bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up this. It's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
of all the money you were making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you're breaking.
We've had enough.
All the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation.
We've had enough.
Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone. How can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We had enough. John Crawford, I know you've heard.
We've had enough.
Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand.
We've had enough.
Sean Bell, what the hell?
We've had enough.
Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said?
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
of the principals, filmmakers, as part of the conversation. But I think, like everybody else, our attention is diverted at the moment by the attention we're paying to the Derek Chauvin trial and to the funeral today, the funeral of young Dante Wright, going on right now in North Minneapolis. I want to proceed and in a minute bring up some of my lawyer panel. I'm pleased to be connecting again today with Dean Burnell Venable Powell, former dean or dean emeritus of the University of South Carolina Law School, with Clinton Collins, who is corporate counsel for the Geico Corporation here in Twin Cities, and who, along with me, served on the board and served as board chairs of the Minneapolis Urban League, and our friend and colleague, Brother Kamau King, joining us from Atlanta, retired corporate counsel at the Coca-Cola Company. We want to continue the discussion we've been having for the past several Thursdays, looking at me interviewing them and asking them to provide analysis of what's going on in the trial. And so we'll do some music when we come back. I know that Clinton and Kamau are both here. We're waiting for Professor Powell to join. After the music break, we'll come back and start that conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm Al McFarlane. That's the music of Sounds of Blackness, Twin Cities' own music organization. The music's so timely. Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired captures the feeling of a lot of us, I believe, here and around the country. I continue with Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm going to build on the interviews we've done in the past several weeks with a team of esteemed lawyers. I call them legal experts who, with me, are analyzing the Derek Chauvin trial and associated items, issues with that. Pleased to have my colleague, friend from way back, I think third grade, Kamau J. King, an attorney who is joining us from Atlanta. He's retired as a corporate counsel for Coca-Cola Company. And then here in Twin Cities, my friend and person that I've done business with, corporate-wise, Clinton Collins, who's corporate counsel for the Geico Corporation, and we'll be joined momentarily by third attorney, Professor Dean Burnell Powell, Emeritus Dean of the University of South Carolina Law School. Let me start by Kamau King, by Clinton, asking you to sort of give a recap. We started this trial, a month ago now? And if you would kind of go back through what happened over the course from the beginning and what we concluded with the verdict a couple of days ago. And you're on mute right now, Clinton, I think, to unmute your mic.
Now,
there we go. Yeah, perfectly.
Well, okay, what happened was when the trial first started, they went through a process of jury selection, which is called voir dire. And each side got so many strikes or opportunities to eliminate jurors they didn't think would be fair. And that lasted several days, given that such a high profile case. The prosecution, clearly wanted to get people who were not going to automatically believe the police just because they were police, and the defense wanted to get people who were not going to automatically condemn them. And I think on balance, they ended up with a pretty fair jury. It was pretty racially balanced. There were people of color, there were women, there were men, and I think the juries ended up being pretty representative of this community. After the voir dire selection was done, then the trial itself started. Each side made its opening statements and explained what they wanted to do during the trial, and then they went into testimony. The prosecution went first. They presented their witnesses. And as the country saw, they had a number of expert witnesses. They had the eyewitnesses who were there at the scene. And most critically was the video taken by the, at the time, 17-year-old teenager, which was probably the star witness of the whole case. I don't think it would have got to where it did, and I don't think we would have had the outcome we did without that video. Then and after each prosecution witness, the defense had the opportunity to cross-examine, ask questions. And then at the conclusion of the prosecution's case, it was the defense's turn to present their position. They didn't have as many experts, and what they were trying to do was to sow reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury, that in order for the jury to convict Derek Chauvin, there had to be a unanimous decision by everybody, all 12 members. And if even one person had dissented, it could have resulted in a hung jury, which means that there was not a consensus, and they would, in the prosecution, would have had the option of either dismissing the case or trying it again. And then after the conclusion of the defense's case, the judge gave the jury their instructions. He went through the law and what the standards were. And then each side made their closing argument. The prosecution went first, and then the defense went, and then the prosecution, because they had the burden of proof. In other words, they were the ones who have to prove that Chauvin was guilty. Chauvin did not have to prove he was innocent, but that the prosecution had to prove he was guilty. They got the last word, and then the jury deliberated, and they reached a verdict, and they found Derek Chauvin guilty in all 3 counts he was charged with, which was murder in the 2nd degree, murder in the 3rd degree, and manslaughter. And so now Chauvin has been taken into custody. My understanding, he's in Stillwater Prison out in Oak Park Heights and awaiting sentencing, which will happen in about 8 weeks. In the meantime, the judge will do what's known or receive what's known as a pre-sentencing investigation, in which there will be people who will look into Derek Chauvin's background, his history, and come up with recommendations as to what his background suggests in terms of punishment. And then the judge will sentence him. And then at that point, he will start to serve a sentence. And Chauvin, if he chooses, and I'm almost certain he will, can bring an appeal. So kind of in a nutshell, that's what has happened and what is going to happen in the next several weeks.
When the sentencing takes place, Clinton Collins, the defense might bring character witnesses or people that have known him to influence how the judge will mete out the sentence. Will that be a time when the family also gets a chance to do a family impact statement? So if they want to see a stiffer penalty, at least their voices, their point of view is on the record?
Yes, there is. And also, if people between now and the sentencing, if people were to send letters of support on Chauvin's behalf, they could do that. And that often happens, where there'll be people in the community who will vouch for, in their opinion, his character, his positive character, at least they would argue that, or plea for mercy or leniency on the part of the court, which the court has the discretion to give whatever weight to it they choose. I mean, they can take it into significant, give it a higher significance, or they can just disregard it. Again, it's up to the court, meaning the judge, ultimately to decide what he's going to do, and then he will issue a sentence.
It is likely that friends and supporters of Chauvin, or of the police in general, will mount a letter writing campaign, isn't it, and try to flood the books with documents that they hope will mitigate some of the sentencing. Likewise, is there likely a similar outpouring of correspondence from families or people part of the victim's family? Does that happen?
Yes, all to the above. But in this case, I don't think, I mean, Chauvin, I'm sure will receive some letters, but I don't think it'll be as much as you would expect. And what's really telling was during the trial, he had a seat reserved in the courtroom for anyone that he wanted to designate to attend, family members, supporters. Most of the time during the trial, that seat was empty. And there's been recent polls, one done by the USA Today just shortly after the verdict, that over 75% of the country, across political lines, across racial lines, supported the verdict. So the point I'm making is that I don't think he's going to receive a lot of letters. There will be some, but this is one case in which the police themselves, as evidenced by the testimony of Chief Arredondo, the other officers that testified, the lack of commentary by police unions across the country, I don't think he's going to be getting an avalanche of support letters.
Kamal King, thank you for joining us. Good to see you again, my friend. Question I have is, where were you when the verdict was being read, and what went through your mind? How did you put all this together based on our conversations and your knowledge of the law and your study, of what happens in the judicial legal process?
Yeah, first, thank you again for inviting me. And Clinton, that was an excellent recap of what occurred, what's been occurring for the last month. Good job. For me, I was driving Miss Carolyn, my wife, to a mall when the news came on. We were listening to NPR, and when the news came on that the jury had reached a decision, and I immediately told my wife that less than 24 hours, he's guilty. Now, what he's guilty of, but they have decided that he is guilty. During the closing arguments for the defense, I felt as though the defense attorney was pointing or directing his arguments to one or two people on that jury who he may have thought were on his side. And when they came back in less than 24 hours, I had the strong feeling that he was going to be found guilty. So, and when he was, I was relieved. Yeah.
When you think, as you talk to your friends and colleagues and people you come in contact with in the community, what feedback are you getting? What is the sense of the community? And I ask that because when the incident, the murder itself unfolded a year ago, there was a spark, not only in Twin Cities, but across the country. And I think your city was one of the cities that went into a massive disruption behind the incident in protest. And so any sense of how Atlanta was feeling? In fact, I got a call from a friend of yours and mine, the owners of the one of the Black Atlanta newspapers, Janice Ware, asking me, this is moments before the verdict, are you all set? And what's going to happen? And how does it feel? And so a colleague in the publishing industry, the black press, was concerned and called to see how it felt up here, suggesting the feelings existed there as well. What do you think?
Yeah, same. The feedback that I received was kind of frightening to me, in the sense that people were saying that if it had not been a guilty verdict, that there would have been problems. There would have been a lot of problems, and that's not what I wanted. I don't see that as being an advantage to the protesters, to the people who felt that he was guilty, rioting and things of that nature. But those were the feedbacks. That's the feedback I was getting, that if he was not found guilty, that it was going to be a lot of problems. But I felt more like the problem would have been the how people in the world viewed America. When you have this kind of evidence, and if he'd have walked away, like in the Rodney King verdict, I thought it would have been just a shame for the United States of America. Let me say this too. It took the young lady actually filming the murder, police officers coming to testify against this man, and we were still on edge as regard to what the jury was going to do. To me, that speaks volumes. about the support that police get in this country.
Great comment. You know, her name, let's say it, Darnella Frazier, 17 at the time, maybe 18 now, but I think kudos to her. And she is an example of both awareness and fortitude. For her to stand there in that tense moment and keep focused on what was unfolding before us, documenting that for the world. And I recall that this past 2 weeks ago when Dante Wright was killed, you could hear, and we've reported that officers continually told people around him to shut down their video. So there were efforts to not record what was happening in Brooklyn Center. And so, you know, to think that young Darnella Frazier had the presence of mind and the courage to stand there and document that, I think is commendable and noteworthy. I think that's really important. So we talked about this last week, but for this video, would there be the prosecution and the conviction that we've seen? What do you think?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Explain that though. Expand on that.
Well, you look at, there has been police brutality against Black people ever since we've been in this country. And generally speaking, the police have gotten away with it. But the video evidence was so clear and it was direct. And when the jury saw it, they were able to see for themselves what happened. And visuals are always more powerful than just a dialogue. And it was much harder for the police to sustain an alternative reality. I was looking at a story just recently that reviewed the initial press release that the Minneapolis police put out after this happened back last May. And in the initial press release, they indicated that words to the effect that George Floyd had a medical condition and he died while they were trying to arrest him. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially they described something that on the surface appeared sad but pretty benign, which is far different than what actually happened. And if the video hadn't existed, you would have had the police officers' testimony against that of the witnesses. And as we've seen countless times, the police are believed over lay people, especially a white police officer over largely Black witnesses almost every single time. But this video was so graphic and so horrific that it was virtually impossible, at least from a political point of view, for state authorities to ignore it. Whereas if there had just been testimony, they could have said, hey, he said, she said. And again, looking at my own experience as a prosecutor, police are believed. They are believed the vast majority of the time. This was one case in which it was very clear that the narrative they put out initially was false on its face.
Will there be a requirement or a request from the community to now examine all cases that involved Derek Chauvin? On one of the national television shows, the former head of the Minneapolis NAACP, Leslie Redmond, said that the Chauvin was a serial killer. That's what she called him. That he'd been involved in several incidents that led to or resulted in the death of citizens, and that he had a number of charges. I think the number was in the teens, most of which were dismissed, but they were filed for excessive use of force. So one of the California commentators on CNN, I think she was a police officer, said this is a time for the city or the court to go back and review all of the cases that were investigated and that charges were brought in based on the work of Derek Chauvin, because he's now proven himself to be a liar. and now a convicted felon, and that puts all of his prior activity in a different light. Is that realistic? Is that how it's looked at in the courts? I see Brunel Venable Powell is with us now. Thank you, cousin, for joining the program again. Let me throw that to you first of all. What are the rules, and what do people be expecting and thinking about when they look at after this conviction, the work that Chauvin had done before in his capacity as an officer of the law?
Well, I guess that was directed at me. And,
yes.
Glad to be with you. I would expect a number of lawyers, those who have been defense counsel in prior cases, ask for a review of the cases. And I would also expect for them essentially to join together and act as a class, seeking a review of all cases in which he's been involved. Just today, I think it was in New York that I'm not sure if he was whether he was the county prosecutor, but one of the chief law enforcement officers there, the chief prosecutors, asked that there be a review of all convictions involving women who have been prosecuted in connection with prostitution and other sex crimes over the last 10 or 15 years. Well, that's the suggestion that this kind of thing is not totally unusual. It does happen from time to time that prosecutors reach a point that they say we no longer have confidence in the witnesses or the participants in the prior prosecution, and we'd like for them to be reviewed. So I think that this is a case that calls out for that there should be such a review. But before we go too far, I would like to go back and pick up a point that Clinton was speaking to, but let me stop here and let you have it. Well, maybe.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you put the question of whether this would have been a conviction absent the video, and I certainly do not want to say that this is a time for celebration because we secured this conviction. It is, I think, way over the top to celebrate the fact that someone is convicted given the evidence that was available in this case. I mean, this was not simply beyond a reasonable doubt. This was a conviction based on evidence that was beyond any doubt. So it does seem to me that even while we are celebrating, that there is an opportunity here to ask legitimately the question that you put. Would have been a conviction absent the video evidence? And I would simply like to suggest that while we can't be totally sure one way or another, there are at least a few developments that we ought to give their fair due. The 1965 Voting Rights Act, which made it put the federal government in the position of overseeing changes in voting rights, has had a profound effect. We are not living in the same world today as we were prior to 1965. The fact that Attorney General Ellison was the one who was prosecuting this case. This means that you got an African American who who is in a powerful position there in Minnesota, specifically involved in this case. And the fact that we had a diverse jury. In fact, the jury in this case was more diverse than juries normally are in Minnesota. Half the people on the jury were people of color. And I also would not dismiss the fact that you had a dream team prosecution in this case. Some of those individuals came out of a very successful, lucrative private practice in order to come back and work with the public sector to this prosecution. So while I'm not saying that this is something that we need to celebrate because the facts are very unusual, but I don't think that we want to miss this as an opportunity to say that people of color have been pushing very hard for a very long time, and some of the evidence of that pushing is available to us in this case.
Dean Powell, one of the things that you said in a previous conversation was that the lens through which we should be viewing this is one that where we ask the question, what would have happened in this trial 20 years ago? What would have happened 10 years ago? And therefore, it gives us some sense of the importance and the progress that we've made reflected in what's happening right now. But even this is insufficient. What's more important is to look at the next case and the next case and the next case, and therein establish a sense of trend, movement towards genuine inclusion and justice that we say we stand for. Expand on that thought, if you would.
Well, I think that we are still several years away from being able to take the true measure of this case. This is a case, I think we would all agree, involved overwhelming evidence. And it also was a case that became an international cause célèbre. The whole world was watching how Minnesota was going to handle this case, how Minnesota, as a representative of the United States, was going to handle this case. And so there are a lot of unique features here. But over time, what we've got to see is whether the standard that is applicable is being applied not just in Minnesota, but in Missouri and in New York and in Alabama and in New Mexico and California. And until we have that evidence before us, I don't think that we can really say that we've had a breakthrough.
Can I jump in? Go ahead, Collins.
One thing I was going to add from the previous question about reopening Chauvin's cases, the Department of Justice, our Attorney General Merrick Garland, announced yesterday that there was going to be a full-scale Justice Department investigation of the Minneapolis police force to examine everything, their operations, their practices. And I think in the course of that, what Chauvin has done will certainly be examined. And the lasting impact of that is that, assuming that the investigation does go forward, and there's no doubt that it will, that the Justice Department will come up with a series of recommendations, and there could very likely be called a consent decree, which is basically a settlement agreement between the government and whoever they're investigating that will be enforced by the court, that they have to do certain things in a certain time frame. And there are a number of other police departments in the country, Seattle, for example, that is under a consent decree. In other words, that they had problems, there was an investigation, the judicial system got involved, and in order to resolve it, they were forced to basically sign a contract that we will do certain things. And I think in the course of that one, everything that Chauvin ever touched will be looked at. And then beyond that, the federal government will be watching Minneapolis very closely. And I think that's one impact that perhaps people don't fully appreciate is going to be significant, perhaps for years to come, because there will be federal independent oversight of the Minneapolis Police Department with real accountability, and that doesn't exist right now, or hasn't up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's going to be, it's going to go beyond Minnesota. I think that this Black Lives Matter movement and the focus is on the police, that any police killing of Black people now anywhere in the United States is going to be looked at. And I think that the chiefs of police, you know, they're probably lecturing their people now, you know, that, you know, we don't want this here. We don't want that here. I think that the camera is on the police. One of the things that this trial has done, that you spoke to, Mr. Collins, is that in the past, whatever police said were accepted. If you were in a trial, whatever police said was accepted. And I don't think that that's going to be as much the case from this point forward, that now people may begin to question.
Well, more specifically, white people will begin to question. We always knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that was interesting was the way in which the police chief in, I guess, Columbus, Ohio, responded in terms of this latest shooting of Makila Bryant, the 16-year-old. He immediately released the videotape. And one of the other things that was interesting about that was that he apparently had ordered his officers to begin, not only to begin wearing the cameras, but to turn them on before they arrive at the scene, and to do that with respect to all cases that officers were responding to. So we are beginning to see some changes. Now, in that particular instance, all of those changes were not in response to the Floyd case, but they are indicators of what you're saying, Kamal, that changes are beginning to take place here.
I've got two concerns to bring up, two ideas that I wanted particularly Burnell and Kamal to respond to, because I sent emails to you both and you both responded. When we grew up in Kansas City, there was a cop named Big Red. I don't know his real name, but I presume that he was an Irishman, that he was a big guy. I know I saw him when I was a kid. And I think the three of us would have always walked to school together and walked home together every day, or walked to the Carver Theater for the summer movies that they had when school was out, and walked back home. We lived, you and I lived in the same house, your dad's house, Burnell, or either next door to you, and Kamal lived a block down the street. So we were, together all the time. So I remember stories in our neighborhood about Big Red. And the story that I remember was that he would stop Black men, even Black kids, and take them out in the country, question them, and then drop them off, make them walk home. But that's intimidation at minimum. Looking back, it's a form of terrorism against Black kids and Black people. Do you guys remember that at all? And how you put our experience, bring that experience into how we analyze what we see in the court and legal and justice system today? Burnell, what do you think?
Well, Big Red was one of my first encounters with the police. It was not a direct encounter. It was indirect, but at a very young age, I had to be less than 10 years of age. I remember him driving up in the police car and jumping out and yelling, "All right, you Negroes," and he wasn't saying Negroes, "get back into your holes." And this was one of the memories growing up that is sheared into my consciousness. I can't unsee that event, and I've replayed it over the decades. That, I think, is not an unusual picture of how Blacks in this country have viewed the police.
Kamal, any memory or thoughts of that or similar?
Yeah, I remember the name Big Red. As a matter of fact, I had forgotten.
As morning draws near, I rise and say my prayer. Little piece of bread to my mouth, little tea to wash it out. It's my daily tribulation, even though I'm a working man. I work so hard to make ends meet, soldier, with one suit and one shoe to my feet. Days are getting so hard, yeah, but I got to keep on pushing on this 9 to 5, working to stay alive. 9 to 5, working till the sun goes down. As the sun sets in the west, I pack my things and head on home, thinking about tomorrow's journey as I try these streets alone. Searching for liberation, yeah. Got to step out of Babylon, take a step to Mount Zion. Days are getting so hard, yeah, but I got to keep on pushing on this 9 to 5, working to stay alive. Oh, on this 9 to 5, yeah, working till sun goes down, sun goes down. Oh, days are getting so hard, yeah, but I got to keep on pushing on this 9 to 5, working to stay alive. Oh, on this 9 to 5, working till the sun goes down, sun goes down, sun goes. On this 9 to 5, yeah, working to stay alive. Oh, on this 9 to 5, yeah, working till the sun goes down. Oh, Lord.